Hello, what's going on, everyone? It's David Palmer, Leo King, and Dr. Ann Wohlcke here for History in the Stars. Good to be with you all. How are you doing, Ann?
I am doing great, and I am really looking forward to this show of religion and contemporary events.
Especially dealing with outer planet transits and the astrology. I got to say, we've covered a lot of different subjects. A lot of it comes back to the different times we're going to speak of today. Do you notice that in the history, like there are just periods that there's too many things that, well, they say history repeats itself, but do you find as a historian that there happens to be places that seem like more of the history repeats?
That's a good question. I love how you always ask the best questions right off the top, but normally I'm the type of person who says history doesn't really repeat itself exactly because it never does. And it repeats in cycles. And that's why I like looking at the astrology along with the history, because astrology does the same thing. The way the astrology lines up is never exactly the same as far as I can gather. I don't think it ever does, but it has. So who is it that said history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes? I can't remember who said that quote. Not Winston Churchill. I don't remember. I'll probably have to Google it here.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's similar to that. You get patterns. And I think what's unique about our show is that we look for these astrological patterns. And then we try to look at, well, what astrology did, or how did the astrology bring out different events at those times? What are we seeing now? And how can we kind of try to determine what exactly is coming back from the past, or how to understand the things that are coming back that seem similar.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And the reason why I ask that question is just because for me as an astrologer, there are lots of different places the astrology goes. The planets are never in the same place, right? Your day of birth, my day of birth are completely different. Mm-hmm. Planets in completely different places. Yet, the transits we happen to be under currently in 2024, and especially over these last 4 years, have just continued to bring up the most potent places, of course, I would say in the history of the last 500 years and within 1,000 years. And then you and I have done episodes where we go back 2,000 years and even farther.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting that the tone that keeps playing of all the things we're seeing right now, it's so easy to see in history. It doesn't maybe repeat the same, but boy, oh boy, do they feel like cousins in history, or do they feel related, the historical events. And I think we wanted to take this show to take something in the current that's happening event-wise and look at it astrologically, and is it correlated to what's happened in history prior, not only history itself, but in the astrology. Mm-hmm. And so today we're going to start off with the Pope of the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. This was something, I don't know, how long ago did we think about this one? A couple weeks ago, I think we planned for this one. And then it became a little bit more intense than we thought.
Yeah. We had heard about the Pope issuing his new proclamation about apparitions and the process of declaring miracles, that was coming out. You're the one who told me about it, May 17th.
Yeah.
And since then, I don't think you knew this was happening, but did you know the Pope was going to be on 60 Minutes?
No.
And when was that last week?
It was just the Sunday that it aired, and then they aired the rest of the interview in the last day. What was interesting was it was the first American interviewer to get to interview the Pope.
Right.
They actually thought that it was going to be a quick interview, like a handshake, maybe ask a question.
Right.
But he sat down for an hour interview. And it was after that he made his, what was it? It's a decree, a proclamation, or it's kind of like a whole church,
is
papal.
I don't, the new norms.
I don't think they like to say canon or papal bulls anymore.
I know. That's what I've been trying to figure out. I still have the language of early modern Europe, and that's not the language now.
I was about to say it's not like the papal facts.
So I'm always doing that, where I think of a term that's from the past, and then I'll say it, and people are like, "What is your problem?" But yes, we could just call it a papal bull, but it's not.
It's not, right? Well, and I think it's interesting because I brought it up because I went on Jimmy Church's radio show last week, and I said, this is pretty big because the astrology is Sun and Jupiter conjunct. Jupiter in astrology is what rules religion, especially the Pope, the figure himself. And it's one day every year that the sun aligns with Jupiter. But really, if you were to look at it astronomically from a heliocentric chart with the sun at the center, it's when the Earth opposes Jupiter. And those events always have some holy significance, words that come from the church. Jupiter plays a lot into that in religious and beliefs. And I was like looking at that and thinking of where we're at as American citizens that you and I are when it comes to phenomena. Although here, it's not so much of the maybe religious, right? It's kind of the opposite. It's more of this cosmic, but also terrestrial phenomena of UAPs now, not UFOs as much. They call them UAPs, but also the weather, things like CERN. The list goes on, right? Like the fact that they added not just about the Mary part of the apparitions, but it also goes into the phenomena area, right? And I think that's where that got my attention, being like, well, in America, we're looking for guidance on this as well. And our Congress is even trying to go to the secret parts of Congress that are confidential, and they're being blocked. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting that the church is willing to at least bring guidance, whether you like it or not, right? At least there's still a route, but it's not your traditional, like, open door, I guess you could say, but...
There's still a route for what? For proclaiming supernatural phenomenon, or?
Yeah, it's just through the church and through a bishop, and then it has to go to account. It's like the Supreme Court. Like it has to get to them to take that case and put it in the docket is really difficult now. And at the end of the day, the Pope is the end all be all now in the new version that's been updated since 1978. I think it was the last time they did it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think it's very interesting also that these new norms, that's as far as I can see, that it's everything just says the norms for proceeding in the discernment of alleged supernatural phenomena. And the date that it became effective was, or the day in the church calendar was on Pentecost.
Oh.
And Pentecost is, I don't know, what is this, due to the sensitive nature of the... Okay, I don't need the ad, but I think that's funny. That's what it puts up. But in the church calendar year, Pentecost is the day that the Holy Spirit comes down and comes upon the people after they were waiting for 50 days after Jesus was, I almost said executed, was crucified.
Right.
Then 50 days later, the Holy Spirit comes among the people to kind of take the place of Christ. And then I think there's like 3,000 new Christians who appear, and the church is on its way. And now the Holy Spirit's governing things. And it was also, Pentecost was already a festival celebrated in the Jewish tradition, and it commemorated the day that they received the Torah, I believe. And before that, it is also just a harvest festival where the first fruits of the harvest were collected. So it's always this symbolism.
It's a pagan thing as well.
So I just think it's interesting that then on this day, what's funny is Jupiter in its place, as you just described it, is sort of like really the presence of God now, opposing us. Like God's got our attention now, right?
Yeah, if you look at it heliocentrically, thinking of the Earth opposing Jupiter, right? To people, when they look at a geo-astrology chart, they look at it as like the Sun and Jupiter are conjunct. But really, the Earth is opposing Jupiter. It's also interesting that on that day, I thought it was interesting, is because all the planets are on 180 degree one side of this whole solar system right now because of that day. Once the Earth opposed Jupiter, from Jupiter to Earth, every planet is just within the same 180 degrees. So a whole half of our solar system is empty of planets right now from the sun's point of view. And then from Earth's point of view too.
But what does that signify for an astrologer then?
To me, I mean, you can look at it multiple ways. It means there's so much consolidated in one area that it creates for this vast open area to want to go explore, to want to go seek, to have questions that need answers, right? Because it's so vast of emptiness. And there's so much in one space. So it also is being bored and wanting to stimulate and to find new things. Because if you're in the same energy and you're surrounded by it, after a while, you might be like, what else is out there? It also, it means that it becomes a very potent time. And I would say that every day that goes by, it gets more potent. Although the story has shifted from pandemic world to, unfortunately, wars and holy wars and also just the geopolitical aspects of countries and where they sit now. And so it's interesting that the Catholic Church, though, I guess you could say made their stand as far as where they're at in the world with things, but dealing very specifically about these Mary apparitions. And for people that don't know, it's like the Lady of Guadalupe, for example, that was seen in Mexico, that was during a Neptune transit in Pisces, by the way, to declare that that's a holy, version of Mary or a holy Vatican recognized apparitions that the church authorizes that, this is true.
Right.
That a miracle took place. But I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things that we all experience miracles in our lives with God all the time. I don't feel like I need to have the Pope's approval or the bishop's approval or anybody's approval to feel like, I chose not to get in my car and then there was a huge car accident where I was supposed to go to or whatever. That might be a simple one, but I feel like those kind of miracles are happening in everybody's life every day. So I think it's interesting that they're really wanting to.
Well, they're defining these miracles of what is it? I love how this on the Catholic World site, that's the app that comes up. It's interesting.
For free Wi-Fi.
But where is it? It's talking about, actually we could look at the beginning of the text of the document. Do you have it, right? The actual text?
The actual text? I
had it up, but I thought you had a nicer one.
Oh, I have the actual one from the Vatican.
Yeah.
I just have to put that up again. Hold on.
This was me looking at the Pope's general audience today.
I actually used AI to actually compare it and to analyze it and say, what is it taking away and all that stuff too. But let's first look at the actual release.
Because it talks about the miracles that are not the ones we experience personally, but those the group ones where we all acknowledge a miracle happened and therefore we get some sort of advantage from it, some sort of spiritual advantage.
Yeah, so it's norms. These are the norms that have to be looked at for the proceeding in the discernment of alleged supernatural phenomena. The presentation, listening to the Spirit who works in the faithful people of God. So, I mean, it does go into God is present and active in our history. I thought the beginning of this, when I read it, was really beautiful. What was interesting to me is it goes into that it's been since 1978 that the norms were put in practice. However, it's become evident that decisions took an excessively long time, sometimes spanning several decades. So it was like there was too much of a backlog and too long to get to them, unless it was a exorcism. That's my joke.
You don't need the whole discernment committee anymore. The person who's doing the exorcism gets to decide.
I mean, that was the first thing in my head, though, is like they went into the Mary and they go into all these other supernatural phenomena. I thought it was interesting they just left out exorcisms. But I bet you it goes through this same thing. But to me, it kind of feels like, we don't want to have to go through them, so we're making it really difficult. Just accept certain things, know the norms, go to your church, speak with your priests. The bishops, will kind of remind you of the norms. Right. It's kind of like a stop to, there's still an opening, but it's really narrow now.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. But your exorcism point, because we were looking at that earlier. Yeah. Sorry, I'm doing a tangent. Fine. But we were looking at the canons for exorcism and thinking about where do they regulate exorcisms, but they don't. There's not as much issued because deciding whether or not someone's possessed, we don't get to have any part in that. The church is fully the one, they're deciding who's possessed. But this, we are getting to participate in the formation of a miracle. So they need to now say, because a miracle can't be validated unless people recognize it as a miracle, right?
Well, so what if, that's the big question, is they left it open for, let's say a UFO comes down with Jesus on it and heals everybody of their ailments. Like, let's say a group of 100 people, and they have video and they have documentation.
Right.
They had to keep that door open for that. But although I still think it would be very difficult because it has to reach the Pope to actually say if it's a miracle or not at the end of the day. That was one of the big changes I thought was really interesting, that bishops were going off and saying things were miracles in other countries. And then it was just kind of like, I guess the old Pope was a little too busy with other things. Like, I won't go there, but yeah. Yeah. So, it talks about the reasons for the new norms, right? And that it is to set up the sacred congregation to judge and approve the ordinary's way of proceeding, to initiate a new examination, to examine these things completely in a new way, in a better, more efficient way, but also that the phenomena that are happening with social media, the internet, that people are getting lost and that people are using it for selfish gain, some of these things. So they want it to be that only the church is the one that determines what those things are. But what got me was in these new aspects, it was the bottom of like, here's the introduction. So it goes into Jesus Christ is the definitive word of God, the first and the last. And the only person that has that authority to represent that word in a human is the Pope, because Jesus Christ through
the disciples.
Yeah, the disciple and through the choosing of a Pope through it's not the bishop, it's the cardinals, right? The cardinals that come together. That it's through that process that Jesus Christ comes through and chooses the Pope. That's my interesting way of looking at it, is like they remind you that it is only the definitive word of God, the first and the last, but it's the Pope that gets that authority to be that too.
Right.
I thought that was really interesting. Or in the revealed word, there is everything necessary for the Christian life. St. John of the Cross affirms that in giving us his Son, his only word, for he possesses no other, the Father spoke everything to us at once in this sole word. I feel like they're also saying the phenomenon, the miracles are happening, and maybe you can just take it for yourself. Maybe you don't need our authority, but we also don't want you going off track and getting lost into what other people are saying are miracles. It's very it's not controlling. But it kind of has those guidelines, the nature of discernment, which this is where I think the history starts to repeat, is discerning what you're listening to. So there's a big battle in the world right now over freedom of speech. In America especially, it's a First Amendment right. And also that falls under with the freedom of religion, the same amendment. But the Catholic Church, of course, is its own entity. It's not of Italy, right? It's its own sovereign grounds. And what's interesting is like they want their followers to be discerning of what is magic, what is divine, what is a phenomenon. And they even go into whether they need to be purified from problematic elements or whether the faithful should be warned about potential risks, whether it's advisable for the competent authority to realize their pastoral value. So they really go into that. They think that people are using the phenomenons happening around the world for selfish gain. That was like a big one.
Well, and here they're regulating it by saying, by following the norms below, the church will be able to fulfill its duty of discerning. So the church, it's affirming that the church still has the duty of discerning whether something's miraculous. So if Jesus comes down on a spaceship and cures 100 people, and everybody had a cell phone, had a video of it, the church is going to be the one that says, no, you're not seeing what you think you see until we discern what actually happened here. And so it's saying the Holy Spirit's a wonderful thing, and it helps us to feel this connection to Jesus. But you have to be careful because you might not know exactly what you're seeing. And it is like they are foreshadowing, or they're understanding the possibility of when you can Google everything on your phone, when AI can create any video, all of those things. That now they're making sure that they're still going to be the clearinghouse for deciding what's a miracle or not, or what's supernatural or not.
Yeah, this is the part where it is important not to overlook that sometimes the discernment may deal with problems such as dialects, manipulation, damage to the unity of the church, undue financial gain, and serious doctrinal errors that could cause scandals and undermine the credibility of the church. So to me, that's, we know the UFO stuff is getting a little bit weird, or the origins of humanity could come out. Especially if you see what's happening right now with James Webb Telescope, that they don't understand the universe anymore. But also, they just found, was it Plato? No, it wasn't Plato. Maybe it was Plato. Like his father-in-law's scrolls, and then they used AI to read through them. And, you know, that means we're going to start in Egypt. They just found a whole new tomb full of another Book of the Dead. That's the longest and most preserved Book of the Dead ever, with all new stuff that the Egypt's museums have not released yet. To me, it's like, those are the things that really, I think, are the scary part for them, is like, what if the story of our past isn't what the Bible says, or even the Old Testament says, right? Because there's a connection to that too.
So they're anticipating some sort of new scientific leap, like Galileo coming out or Copernicus coming out and reconfiguring how we think of the solar system. They want to make sure they're the stopgap, whatever. They're the gatekeeper of what we think we know.
But I think that's the last line I have highlighted: undermine the credibility of the church.
Right.
I also think they're maybe reading the way that things are happening in the world with Israel right now, because we don't think of Israel as like a Catholic church. It's a country, but it's the country based off of religion, you know? So it's interesting that you're seeing how the world's coming after that. What happens if the world comes after the Catholic Church again for something? But if it's because of some explorative mission that was finding something on a planet or finding something miraculous. Because I think that they're trying to keep it about the miracles of the old past, but I think that they're not knowing how to really describe the new phenomena. Because what I got in here was they didn't really try to get into specifics of what phenomena is, as far as like UFOs or what we're just people using it for selfish gain to take the church down, which to me is the history of where we're at about Reformation.
Right. Reformation and Renaissance.
Yeah.
I just had this light bulb go off about something you talked about before, which was the period of time with similar astrology in European history is when the Renaissance really starts to gain momentum.
Yeah.
Right. And I was thinking, I kept thinking of Reformation. I kept thinking of printing press and just, new translations of the Bible and all of this. But also when you think about how all the new learning was coming back into Europe, right? And there were new ideas that were coming from the Arab world or Asia. Yeah. These new ideas that were influencing the way astronomers looked at math and figured out what the universe was like.
Or influenced Jesus.
Influenced Jesus in his era
in his life, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of the Arabic stuff.
Well, yeah, and so much knowledge about that was coming into Europe at that time too. So of course.
Or all the Rosicrucians, like they were looking at all the Arabic stuff, because astrology got saved by the Arabs during a time when Christianity and the Catholic Church was all kind of figuring itself out, let's just say, for a while. So
yeah, and also the Eastern Roman Empire, which sometimes it's called the Byzantine Empire, but that's where a lot of knowledge was as well that was coming back into Western Europe.
Or we did that one, History in the Stars, where the oldest university in the world is actually, I think, in Iran, and I forgot Saladin. There was that one guy who he was like the
guy who wrote
astrologer
about enlightenment.
And he went to that university and he was teaching Saladin's son all that stuff, and then Saladin had him killed because that info was too hot to handle.
Right, because in all these different areas, I'm thinking of how earlier you brought up Dune.
Yeah.
In all these different areas, religion had connected with the state in some way.
Yeah.
And was keeping people controlled.
Yeah, so the conclusions were the discernment of alleged supernatural phenomena may reach conclusions that are usually expressed in one of the terms listed below. And of course, they bring their Latin out, but many signs of the action of the Holy Spirit are acknowledged in the midst. I thought that was an interesting part of the Bible that they put in the midst, which really that term kind of goes into the fog, or very Neptunian.
Or in the midst, in the middle of, right?
In the middle of, but that also is very Neptunian.
Yeah.
Very Piscean or purgatory-ish, but it's not really purgatory, but it to me, it's that old term midst. Well, actually, let's just have fun.
Let's look it up.
I want to look at the origin of that, because their first recording in 1350 Middle English, equivalent to the middles in the middle. That means that's coming from a English translation then, but it had to come from a root word, not English.
Yeah, it showed admits the something. Oh, are you
in the middle, between the middle, Goss, Midgey, Old English. Oh. I wonder if they have it in Greek. Between. That's interesting to me, because that's where spirituality and all of these things are in between worlds.
Yeah, that's what this whole document is navigating
Right.
the in-between space.
Yeah.
Because it's acknowledging that there's separation between the worlds that happens sometimes. But we, as mere lay people, mortals, we can't determine it for ourselves.
Yeah.
We would need some assistance to determine. And it's all of that stuff about mediating of,
Which is very Roman. It reminds me of how in the Roman senates, they would have the magi that would the magistrates was the technical term, that would, if there was a problem, it'd be like, okay, get the magistrates, get the ones that actually are going to look at it, not from our political stance, but be like, why is there a famine? Well, the astrology says, they at least were. That's what's different about the republic of today in America, is we don't get the magistrates to come in, because there is the separation of church and state.
The magistrates are so busy arguing all the time.
Well, I agree, but I think it's an interesting.
But, yeah.
I understand why there is the separation of church and state, because I actually think that it has more poorly negative aspects to it than good. But the only good that can come out of it is for morality, if it's used for a moral case, and it's not pushing an agenda of one way or the other. But that's hard in today's world, because it's more based off religious people than there are people who are coming from a non-secular spiritual place. But I thought it was interesting. The more I went into this, it brought more power to the Pope to make the decision at the end of the day. It made a council that is going to look at these things. And that's why I'm calling it like the Supreme Court, because like to get an actual Supreme Court case is very difficult, right? And it's not a bunch of judges at the end of the day that'll make the decision. It's one person, the Pope. That's what was the most interesting to me.
Also, I mean, they will go based on prior dictates of the Pope, right? But in this situation and in history, you could have one Pope who has one approach. The next Pope comes in and decides, hey, wait, that guy was wrong. I'm going to call a church council, and we are doing this. And our Supreme Court has the laws that keep them in check, right? So,
well, in their doctrine here, now they say when it comes to critical issues that are not connected to the phenomenon itself, which are rich in positive elements, but to a person, a family, or a group of people who are misusing it, for instance, the spiritual experience may be exploited for particular and undue financial gain, committing immoral acts, or carrying out a pastoral activity apart from the one already present. It's like they're saying in this situation, the pastoral leadership of the specific place where the phenomenon is occurring is entrusted to the bishop in that area, or to another person delegated by the Holy See, who is unable to intervene directly, will try to reach a reasonable agreement. So the Pope doesn't have to get involved. Like, if it's for something that we don't feel is connected to a phenomenon itself, but it's almost kind of like reach an agreement, like shut up. What can we do to make you shut up?
It's interesting
because if you see the Pope
through
there acknowledging maybe a real conspiracy that looks real, you don't want the Pope there. You just want secret meeting. How much money do you want? I mean, I'm looking at it way different than probably a lot of other people are, but that's what it means. You don't want if you see the Pope going all the way to, I don't know, like there was those Peru guys who came out and said that those were aliens, even though they weren't. Pretty
That's
easy
what
to
I have
see.
been thinking about this whole time. I keep thinking of all those pictures and
like how people were believing that, right? But let's say that if you saw the Pope go down there to tell them it's not real, then now people are going to think it's real. Right?
Probably.
Right? Like he's intervening so much.
There will be a secret cult. It'll drive it underground.
So they don't want the Pope going anywhere. Anything that's actually going to be decided is coming to the church in their control.
In these cases like this, it's exactly what you're saying, that the church doesn't always have to intercede because I think at the top, like if you scroll back up a little bit, it has that idea of somewhere it talks about, as long as it's doing good, if it's creating a spiritual.
Yeah, if it's doing a positive element, right? But to a person, a family, or a group of people who are misusing it, that's the opposite, where it would be using it as a rich and positive experience, whether it's an individual, a family, or a group of people.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that's the case of submandato, where it determines, okay, well, we don't need to worry about whether or not this phenomenon is true because it has all these positive things that are coming about and it's not going to do any harm. So the diocesan bishop can handle that.
Yeah.
He can go in and figure out what to do.
But I think what's weird about this is this all has to come through the Catholic Church's view and the Christian doctrine. Meaning, if a miracle happens that's not connected to, let's say, a saint or an angel or Christ himself, then it doesn't even get considered.
What kind of miracle? I wonder what kind of miracle would happen that they wouldn't connect. I guess if it were a Buddhist miracle, obviously.
I mean, I would just say a
like
spiritual one, right? Like the energy of, let's say, millions of people feeling like there's something off in the world through the pandemic is a miracle that people stopped the hysteria by saying no. To me, that's a spiritual miracle. But
yeah, that's a good example.
Right? That's millions of people, tens of millions of people around the world saying no. But
I want to ask about the astrology behind that, but go on, continue.
I mean, that's the same astrology, right? If I were to, now we'll use a little history stars aspect, and we'll go to 2021, because really it's 2021 that people start to say no at the very beginning. But a lot of people are saying no. I mean, if I were to use, like, let's say it's January 6th, not to try and trigger people here, but if I were to try and use this, let me go here. You have that Saturn and Pluto conjunction that just happened. But when Saturn and Jupiter have met in Aquarius, right? People start either following what other people are doing, or people start realizing, no, I know me as a human. I know the rights of my human energy. And I also don't have to participate in anything that doesn't feel like it's expanding or being positive in my life or being judged against, right? Because there's an element too of that judgment that came really harsh on people who, let's say, didn't take the vaccine or chose not to wear a mask, or right? Like that it was almost inhuman to do so, right? That was the year in which it was the Uranus square over to Saturn and also Jupiter, and the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happening through Aquarius, which they did conjunct in Aquarius at 0 degree, which that didn't happen in 1960. It happened at 29 Capricorn, the last time we were in this cycle 60 years ago. It's every 20 years that Jupiter-Saturn meet, but it was when JFK was elected that they were in the same place. Just happened to happen at 29 Capricorn.
When the last Catholic president, or the first Catholic president,
so that was something that was interesting as an astrologer to see that actually that Jupiter is so strong when it comes to the faith of the president, who it's going to be now. That's a data point of, if Jupiter and Saturn every 60 years come around to that point, we need to pay attention. Although in 1900, the president died right away, and then Theodore Roosevelt became the president.
Right.
So that was a better data point now, having Pluto and Saturn at the same time making their conjunction.
So for this, since it's Pluto and Capricorn, excuse me while I ask my beginners astrology questions, but what does that mean about what exactly is being transformed about the larger structure of the Capricornian structure? So when this all comes together, is that to help create the transformation Pluto is bringing in that area?
Well, if you think of Pluto, you have to think of it, it's ruled by Scorpio. Scorpio's the one that you look at. Pluto rules Scorpio. So Pluto is more of like a pump and dump scheme, because it deals with investments. It deals with energy that's desperately wanted, but might not necessarily have it. So we have to find that will to survive. It's that energy of survival. It's also that energy of transformation, but that transformation usually comes from decay. It's the planet that rules decay. So it's really the decaying of the structures, while the investments go to extraordinary lengths to keep and propping up, in this case, Capricorn, the systems. So the debt is out of control for governments. The structures, look at freeways. That's why they did an infrastructure bill, yet we haven't seen it work yet, right? People are upset about that. Or if you look at it from institutions, because Capricorn rules institutions, there's been a huge decay, whether it's, you can go into any institutional part of that. When it came to corporations and the idea of where an individual feels their success and work, it became an obsession. That's the other thing of Pluto. It became this obsession over fame, which is what Capricorn rules, public fame, business fame, CEOs. So if you think of when it came in 2008, it wasn't a big deal to be a CEO. Like, that was almost like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Like, most people just wanted a good job and a happy life and a family. Something changed in 2008 with Pluto becoming this obsessive. It starts very simple with Pluto. When it comes in, I'll use a Michael Luton quote because I love Michael Luton so much. It's a little bird that comes in with like a piece of trash in your backyard. By the end of the cycle, it's a dump truck dumping all the trash on you. Right? So you don't think of it as a big deal, like this trash in your backyard from this little bird. But by the end of it, it's dump trucks. Just, what's going on, right? Like, that's how long the transportation
institution's takes. Trying to keep that trash out, like trying to continue to go.
Correct, but it's still showing up more and more and more. So the problem with Pluto and Capricorn, whether you take it back to the last time we were around 248 years ago, it's what created, right, the revolution in America. It's also, what created this idea within people of the institution of a monarchy is no longer worth the investment of our taxes, because taxes are ruled by Pluto too, right?
Right.
And our efforts and our obsession is over, because it also can be, some people can become obsessed, and then other people could be like, I am not feeling connected at all to this anymore emotionally. Like, I could live without it. So if you think about it, it's this simultaneous aspect that Pluto brings of, on one side, you have the culture and you have society going through an obsession of trying to maintain the structures. And then the other half going, I don't even want this anymore. But you connect that with the things happening in Aquarius, especially with Saturn in Aquarius. That means it's dispositing over to Capricorn, because Saturn's the ruler of Capricorn, but it also does rule Aquarius. But now with modern astrology, Uranus is the co-ruler of Aquarius. So we can look at Uranus. What was in square to Uranus? And then dispositing over to Capricorn, oh, Pluto was there. So the Aquarian aspect was, oh, we're trying to find ways to solve things, but it's too heavy. There's too much decay. So what should have happened was, okay, let everybody have their individual freedom and rights, and let's just see how that works instead of causing more stress on people or trying to control the situations too much. But also, you go back to the time prior to the 1760s and the 1770s, that's what gets us to the end of the 1520s into the very beginning of the 1530s, where Reformation launches bigger than ever, and heresy against Martin Luther becomes to the point of his, he's excommunicated. Henry VIII says, bye-bye, Catholic Church, right? So,
Anabaptists go out of
so
control.
we're in that moment right now.
I wanted to bring up something interesting that I thought of while you were talking about this. I never thought of the decay of an institution during this Pluto and Capricorn from the perspective of thinking of the Catholic Church. But I just thought, I looked it up and I thought, what about that film Spotlight? When did it come out? It was in 2015.
Yeah, that was a good movie, actually.
And it's sort of a similar thing where the Roman Catholic Church was trying to take care of that problem on its own, and it was making it worse. And they would just move priests around, and hopefully I'm not being too offensive or anything. I'm trying to relate it in the way that I remember.
Oh, no, you're good.
I went to a Catholic high school, and I'm not Catholic, but I think 3 of the priests who were at my school are on one of the lists, and one of them was named at the end of Spotlight when they listed all those people, right? And so it's just something that I've been aware of and followed. But a lot of those priests were moved around the diocese. And I happen to grow up at the edge of the Los Angeles diocese. So a lot of the undesirables ended up out there where I grew up, right? And so it's as if they've been doing this for so long. Is it that Pluto is in Capricorn that you can't get away with doing those sorts of things that they're not for the health of the overall institution?
Yeah, well, it becomes Pluto rules also. What was it gets overlooked a lot, but what was George Washington's war? What did he bring to war that was a new thing that was really established, that was unique, that people always...
Smallpox vaccination?
Well, that's a good point.
Or not inoculation. But I don't know
the
what else.
spies.
Oh, right. Yes.
Right? And then Britain had to combat that, right? So you can look at it as like Pluto deals with this kind of like hush-hush energy that becomes like where we know that this stuff's going on, but only certain people know. And in Capricorn, it's very tight circle, only to the top, right? So that becomes where, we live in there's no difference in China having CCTV cameras, like those cameras that are everywhere, than we do that our phones and TikTok and all these things are recording us all the time.
Right.
But on top of it, it's like one of those things to where the conformity to morals that are based upon the institutions, right? Like the way that you should act at a corporation becomes amplified to the max.
Oh, okay.
Right? So hence, you work for this corporation. We have a mandate by OSHA, not by the U.S., not by the people, right? An institution from the executive branch that's really not elected by the people, right? That's issuing to all of the businesses with 100 employees or over that the decorum here is that you get this vaccination, even if it is an experiment, or you lose your job. Or the same thing happened in the military, right? Like you're serving this country, but we determine, but you're out of the Constitution when you go to the UCMJ, right? The Universal Code of Military Justice. Like you're in a different world when you're in the military. But same thing, right? Like this overarching moral duty becomes where the boundaries of that, it goes past it. So when you brought up the decay of the church, it's the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in 2020 that happens 3 times in Capricorn. So what happens in 2020 is this was a triple conjunction, meaning it happened 3 times. The last time that Jupiter-Pluto happened 3 times was in Leo, going all the way back to at the end of the 50s. So the beginning of the 50s was air travel. It was most Americans went to church on Sundays. It was the home industry becoming the boom of suburbia, right? And everybody believing that they can live this Betty Crocker, good housekeeping, go to church on Sundays, and you can have a car and a house life. Mm-hmm. That ended in 2020, but that connects to all those things. The housing, right? And now it's a crazy place.
Right.
It's the hardest to get a home now. Yeah. It's the hardest to get a car now, the most expensive. More people are not going to care about what just came out by the Catholic Church and not follow it, right?
Which is why we have to explain why it matters,
right?
Or what we're looking at.
And then if you think about it, you don't see the church do much in 2020 about COVID, not till 2021. So the year of the decay becomes more I think what's hard is like you see the Protestants, like you see the Presbyterian churches, you see the people who don't consider themselves Catholic in the Christian faith doing online live streaming and doing well. Mm-hmm. You don't see the Catholic Church doing a good job with that, right? So, and you see people actually join Christianity as a whole, if we lump it as a whole. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean they're getting into the Catholic doors.
Right.
So to me, it's that crumbling that's based upon the things that happened the last time you saw a triple conjunction of Jupiter, Pluto, but it also had Saturn there, right? So that's, well, this is the last time this happened was in 1284, and that was the holy wars that we were losing. The Catholic Church was losing its grip on being able to send people to the Holy Lands. The Holy Lands were being lost. I think it was I forgot which one of the holy wars because there were so many, but it was one of the last crusades that was.
I don't remember either.
But it was the last of the crusades, right? By the time that we get to the beginning of the 1310s and so forth, it not even 1310, by 1307, it was done. But so it's the end of the holy last crusade, right? The Crusaders are at their end. And at the same token, it is a fear of if the church is going to be okay, right? Because so many of the Crusaders came from all the different Catholic nations, and there's not going to be that consolidation of power anymore of a Crusader force.
Not for the Roman Catholic
what it
Church,
means is
right?
if you look at the 1284 one, then you go to 1518, that's the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And that one's big because that's Martin Luther in 1517 putting his thesis on the doors. The Catholic, and basically the Pope kind of coming out as if he is the one that's supposed to tell everybody how to live, and people start going, what? So it's the Pope actually going out of line. Even though it feels like it's Martin Luther, but a lot of that history is the Pope really kind of targets Martin Luther, right? So, and then that was the off of decorum of like, we need to really stop this idea and rhetoric. And kind of acting as if he's the ruler of the lands when he's not.
The Pope, yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the thing so here are a couple of things I was thinking of about the church. First of all, it makes you wonder, and I brought this up earlier, why does the church survive? How does it survive? It always conforms, transmutes, whatever, and it's there in another form ever since the Roman Catholic Church started. I mean, it started and then it broke, right? But there's still this aspect of the Roman Catholic Church that still exists. And that's why it's like you want to look at what are the techniques and strategies it uses every time to conform and make it through. And part of what those new norms do is that it continues something that the Roman Catholic Church was doing in the era of the Jesuits and in the era of the missions, right? Where you'd have priests going out in missions to convert people, and they would use, actually, this is something the church used for many years, right? That you can accept a certain number of practices as long as the people are believing they're doing it for Jesus or for some other reason, right? And that they adapt to different circumstances. But in the era of Martin Luther, you see the Holy Roman Emperor becoming involved.
Yeah.
And a lot of issues come up because the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, is trying to appoint people to positions who aren't, actual priests. They're doing things for political reasons, not religious reasons. And they're giving a lot of things to the Protestants to critique. But it's really, you see a lot of new techniques being used by the Pope to keep different kings or monarchs on the side of the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Which is why when Henry VIII tried to break away, it was such a big deal too. and they had to excommunicate the king and all of that. But it was another strategy of the church.
Well, what's interesting is you see with Martin Luther in 1517 into 1518, there's the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that we saw in 2020, right? We have to remember that the last one was 1518 to 2020. There wasn't one in between in Capricorn.
Saturn conjunct Pluto.
In Capricorn, right? It didn't happen there. It missed. It hit in Aquarius right after the Revolutionary War, which is really interesting. So that's why you didn't see this control system, right? You saw the revolution happen, no problem.
Right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So then you get to seeing Neptune on its way out of Aquarius, right? And coming into Pisces like we've been having since 2011. That's coming to its end next year, right? So if you just kind of follow the Saturn-Pluto transit and follow the Neptune transit, you get to that beginning of the 1530s, which is where we're at now, right? So if I just take this by year and I get us to like, let's say 1531, right? Here we are. It's almost like mimicking our world. This is where Pluto's coming this year to retrograde for the last time, 29 degrees, and come direct on the election. Here's Neptune, 24 Pisces, where we just were in the last year, coming to the end of the sign. And so this is when Henry says bye-bye, like he's making the efforts to actually do it. And I think it's by 1532, it's done. And that's where then the other events that happen around the world, because there were so many about Reformation, but really there's Neptune into Pisces, there's Pluto into Aquarius, like we're in right now. And by 1532 into 1533, it is done. And the Reformation is extreme. And also Martin Luther gets excommunicated around this time too. It took a while to excommunicate him. But because of Henry and because of what Henry VIII did, it becomes this domino effect that becomes extreme. And that's where right now we do have to pay attention to these things that are happening because they all have meaning. It might not seem like it to people, but especially that emphasis on phenomena, right? We're in a world that's all phenomena right now. Computers talk to each other and they can generate fake videos that look like people. They can, we're seeing UAP stuff, origins of the world. Like we have all these secret government contracts of UFOs and this new man array and all these crazy things. We're in a world where they're trying to go to space. They're cooking food in space.
Are they? I didn't know they were cooking food in space.
They just cook.
Do they have a cooking show from space?
They think the future is cooking food in space, that it's a better space, I guess, to cook in. I don't know. But it starts to get really funky. And because I feel like the whole Martin Luther thing is kind of like a scare to the church because it almost kind of makes him feel like a martyr like Jesus was, right? Like as if he's a human that's coming around saying there's this other way to look at it. Because in his thesis, the Pope has gone too far acting like he is the leader of the land when he's not, right? Like that's one of the main things in the thesis. So it's like calling him out and also calling out the way that people don't even understand what they're doing.
It's calling out that the church has initiated all these practices, beliefs like purgatory that don't come from the Bible.
Right.
And he's asking, are these appropriate beliefs? Are they actually Christian? Should we go back? And he can do that because now people have access to the Bible. And, he did already because he was within the church, but he translates the Bible. And that's what I was wondering. So when Pluto goes into Aquarius, is it 1532 or when did it come in?
It's 1531 into 1532.
So during the 1520s, what's interesting is that, so much happens. Like you talked about this heretical revolt in the Netherlands in
1523 is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, which we're in right now.
Okay, so
that's the heretic laws by the Pope
Well, there were peasants' rebellions happening because of Martin Luther.
Yeah.
And it was when, actually that's a little bit later, but they started to see.
It starts right there as 1524 happens is where we'll be next year.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Where we'll be for the Pluto.
For Saturn and Pisces, with Neptune and Pisces, but Saturn will be getting ready to leave, right? Mm-hmm. By the beginning of 2026, Saturn ingresses into Aries. So that Peasants' War is the same thing. After Saturn's with Neptune and it comes into Aries, boom. Or all the work I did on Nostradamus, all of his prophecies were made upon Saturn's 0-degree ingress into Aries and determining the 7 cycles of Saturn after.
So is that a 7th cycle or? Correct. Interesting. Are we in a 7th one again? I don't remember. I should.
No, I always show that there's the first 3 and the third one has a major cataclysmic event. I mean, that's a whole nother.
Well, that's the Hypergate school.
Yeah, that's years of crazy stuff that I've never put even out on YouTube.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing about, look at the Peasants' War, how crazy it got in such a short amount of time. Inspired by changes brought by the Reformation, peasants in Western and Southern Germany invoked divine law to demand agrarian rights and freedom from oppression by nobles and landlords. And then obviously you're going to get the nobles, the people who own the land, brutally put this down, and Martin Luther has to write against this because it's an example of how quickly the ideas, and once the authority of the church had been, done and attacked, the church had been attacked.
Yeah.
And there was also, it wouldn't have happened if Luther didn't have support from his local officials. So it's like the government is also saying, okay, let's take advantage of this. But then it goes too far where the peasants start to uprise.
Yeah.
And it spins out of control. And it's this unintended consequences thing that they have to bring back quickly.
What's crazy, if you do the astrology of 1524, there's Saturn and Neptune, and Saturn is at 18 degrees of Pisces today. There it is at 16 degrees. And then there's Jupiter in Pisces. So Jupiter had just met with Neptune. We just saw that in 2022. You and I did our History in the Stars special of 2022 about Jupiter-Neptune cycles. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is now Jupiter's in Gemini. That comes this weekend for a year, and it's going to square Saturn, meaning it's going to bring up the stuff from this period a lot.
So it's time for a peasants' rebellion.
I would say when you mix Pluto at the end of Capricorn into Aquarius, Uranus at the end of Taurus coming into Gemini, that's World War II, that's the Revolutionary War, it's the Civil War. Neptune and Pisces, leaving Pisces, coming into Aries, which is next year, that's the Civil War, but many other intense events that we've actually covered in some of the history. We're going to cover more in the 1530s, right? And then on top of it, you have Pluto, the Uranus, and then the Neptune, all 3 outer planets coming to their end zones of these same signs, that you get the most extreme religious, cultural, and war aspects or dividing energies that are, especially if you look at Western history, but the more I even look at Eastern history, those things are happening. The Mongolian Empire in the 1200s, what happens in the East in the 1500s, and what happens in the East in the 1770s, and what happens in the East now, right? That there's a big change there. China's the leader now, It's all happening all the time.
And then by the time of the 1530s, because I was going
that's where we are now as the astrology is to reflect in history the most connected to that point.
So what about what's the date? October 6th, 1536.
So if we do
and I know obviously the astrology on that day is probably not
1536.
Yeah.
So Pluto, that's us next year. Pluto coming to 5 degrees. That's us with Neptune coming into Aries, but Aries, it's a little bit ahead. And then Uranus at that time, it wasn't in the same. But
so here's a picture of what was happening at that point. If you, I don't know if you can show mine. Is William Tyndale was being first strangled and then burned over in the Netherlands, I guess at the time, because he had translated a Bible into English. He had already had to leave England because while Henry VIII was still Catholic, he opposed William Tyndale's work. He ended up having to go over to Europe, and he was eventually executed for having translated the New Testament and putting that into the hands of people. So by the 1530s, there's a lot of...
well, isn't there the... in Germany, the... what is that?
And then the Münster
the
Rebellion.
Münster Rebellion, which that's more 1535, right?
Right.
And that's more in alignment with where we really are coming into next year.
Okay, so...
Right? So, like... And then it's weird. Thing. It's weird how Holland is so involved. Like the ICC just is declaring to arrest the head of the prime minister of Israel, but also the heads of Hamas. And now you're seeing this split where Germany's saying, no, we'll arrest him. Which is so crazy to me.
So that's the same astrology as when the Münster uprising was happening. Because
correct.
Okay, so
yes.
here's the church where that happened, at a Catholic church in Münster, Germany. And you can I love my Google Earth. I love exploring the places.
Yeah, no, it's great.
But
it's awesome in Apple Vision Pro.
Oh, that would be so fun. So this is just where there was an uprising where Anabaptists took over the town of Münster and had their own mayor elected. And they were ruling the town as this kind of a commune of people who believed in adult baptism. They believed in polygamy, and they wanted to rule their own territory, free from the Roman Catholic Church interfering or anything
And they
else.
were from, one of the leaders was from The Hague in the Netherlands, which is exactly where the ICC is, in The Hague now. So it's almost like, well, same thing happened during James' time, right? After he brings out the King James Version of the Bible. I mean, what happens? You see a bunch of the pilgrims go to the Netherlands to go be free of religious persecution in England.
Well, at the same time, witch trials
and
happening.
Witch trials.
Like being stepped
and
up.
then they buy the Mayflower, they come back and they leave. So the Holland has been a place after, because what was happening in 1523 is the Pope declares the heresy laws, and then by 1524 he dies and a new Pope comes in, and then it doesn't stick. And then it becomes a flourishing place of publishing out pretty much a lot of the different alternative views of the world.
Yeah. And then all these religious wars kind of start. But this, I was trying to show the tower, because this is where I was showing you on the tower.
I'm going to say it looks like a vampire tower. But that's very German architecture, but yeah.
But the picture's so bad. Come on, Google. You could do this better. These are 3 cages up on that tower. And
where they held people.
Yeah, they were executed and then put up there to showcase what happened to you. And it's,
do you have
on
that
the
picture
Catholic
that's of, like, there's like a painting of like what it looked like, the rebellion and their whole congregation? I think I saw it on like Wikipedia when you were looking at it, but it was an interesting painting of like all the people and how they're all hanging out, and they're all like, that green one, the city under siege. Yeah.
Can't zoom
And then when you were naming stuff, it reminded me of the Mormons, right? Like polygamy, because there wasn't enough men to impregnate the women to keep their ideals going.
Right.
They also called it Zion.
Right. And this was talking about one of the leaders was walking around the city because it was supposed to be like the new Jerusalem, and he was trying to act out one of the biblical stories when he was captured and executed. And
that's what makes this time interesting, is the reoccurrence now of you're hearing people talk about Zionism all the time. The irony, though, is it's the Christians that like to go around, including Mormons, right? They're the ones who believe that the new Zion is in America, that Jerusalem should be moved to America. That's why the Mormons are here, right? Or in that case, right, it's more Christians claiming the Zionism in history than the Jews. That's what I think is really interesting.
Well, yeah. I mean, because you have to look at Revelation and how people interpret it and what they feel is going to lead to the ultimate, salvation, or what is it called? I always forget the name of the word.
But it's interesting that those are not crazy times for me to see begin in the year ahead. Okay, it's what's happening right now.
So what would happen right now is, wait a second, go back. I can't get it to go back to the Munster Rebellion.
In the execution style, just go look at what's happening on college campuses today. It's one step from that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. And it's not even what's happening in the war that's being protested. It's like we're in a similar period of time where you've got the media in place to spread ideas, and people were indoctrinated in certain ideas because of the way the algorithms were working, right? Everybody was getting all this information for their particular side. And it was bound to happen in a large way, that there would be some sort of large altercation. Like, I never expected it was going to be this, right? That it would be over Israel and Palestine. But I think that you've shown in other videos why the holy wars are coming back right now. So it's like holy war meets revolution of press. Right, because that's what at the time of
it's
the
all
German
about
peasants'
the press.
vote was all.
It's always been about the press.
Yeah,
whether that was the press of pamphlets, that's what started the Revolutionary War, was Thomas Paine. Like, everybody forgets that the founding fathers listened to Thomas Paine's ideas of the Republic,
or Benjamin Franklin, right, with
who wasn't even here in America during the Revolutionary War. He was in France, but he had a press there, and he was manipulating the French too in order to get money. Because he couldn't get it from the king, from rich aristocrats to invest into America.
Right.
But then the king would finally be succumbed to sign a treaty and say, okay, yes.
Because they figured out how.
Right. So there's a lot of manipulation. That's the other thing about Pluto. It doesn't matter what sign it is, it deals with manipulation. There's a manipulation of the formal routes to go things, but in Aquarius, now there's manipulation in what you think is the people, right? Like if you're seeing right now in independent media, you're actually seeing that they get more of the views than the legacy media, and they're doing more deals. If you see, it's the same person on the same shows. You know they're doing a book tour. You knew they're doing this, and they go on they go on Joe Rogan, they go on Tucker, they go on this, and it's all to also push a thing at the same time. When a story comes out on Twitter, they all have their view on it. They all have their stories come out at the same time. That's how the printing presses worked if you knew how to do it, right? You would get an insider to get the story before and try and get it out before, the big, let's say the monarchy had some plan. Oh, we got them on that.
It's interesting that I thought of the film Spotlight, because it's all about how journalists were uncovering that whole story and piecing it together and working the way that press is supposed to work, or was supposed to. But we're seeing that now in more independent media.
Yeah, and if I could, I just want to say this about the decay. If we think about I'm this one. So if we think about, I'm going to take the chart for today. And if we look at that, we are in the end of Neptune, literally at the last degree of Pisces. I'll annotate here. So it's going to retrograde here in the next month. So it's not going to come in Aries, but it's literally within 20 minutes, like 24 minutes. Like it's right there. Right? So it's touching the 0 point of Aries almost. And here's Saturn. So that's weird though, because in 1523 with Saturn in front of Neptune and conjuncting, we're not going to see them meet in Pisces at all. They're going to meet in Aries at 0 degrees in 2026. And the last time that happened at 0 degrees, I had to go all the way back to Babylon, when Babylon changed, and there was a big change in the Babylonian Empire. It was all the way back in like 2000 BC, right? The other thing is, of course, Uranus is ending in Taurus this year. This is the last year of it staying in Taurus. Then, of course, Pluto is coming back into Capricorn and finishes in November, where it comes back into Aquarius for the next 20 years. So the question is about the decay of the power of the church. Well, obviously, they can put out what they've just put out, but is that going to, do they have people that are going to be from the church going around and telling people what to do? No.
But
right?
Interestingly enough, they started to do the same thing in 1536,
Correct.
37.
So I'm just going to put up the stories. So we'll just do this ICC Netanyahu thing and like what's happening right now that I think is like really, really kind of, I don't know. This is actually what I predicted was, we're in the Uranus transit of World War II right now, of Nazi Germany going into Poland, and the beginning of what we saw that was horrible with the Holocaust of the Jews, right? And so if you type in Germany, and people almost didn't believe this was coming. They actually thought, no, it's Israel that's going to, do this. Germany would never do it all again. But as of 11 hours ago, Germany says it will arrest Netanyahu. And it's caused a major uproar, right? That they're the ones saying we're going to enforce it. We will arrest him. So if I do within the past hour, right, will arrest is Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu for war crimes if ordered. Germany. Now the other thing that I showed you, and this is more recent history of Uranus at this degree, but it's Germany moves troops, right? For first time since World War II. And that is a fact, right? So Germany has not moved troops since World War II in a foreign deployment since Hitler was the Führer. And a month ago, German troops arrive in Lithuania for their first long-term foreign deployment since World War II. They've also got their Luftwaffe back, right? People thought it was a joke. That's just the name of the German name of
the Luftwaffe.
The
Air
Luftwaffe,
Force.
right? The Air Force. So to me, I'm like, oh, okay. You're seeing the history repeat as far as...
But in a weird way. It's on behalf of NATO, right?
Correct. But this is where I have some data that you and I did, right? So... in the ICC, America and Israel are not countries that have signed to the Roman, what is it called?
Statute.
The Roman Statute, which I think is the funniest thing in the whole world because...
Why? So this stuff rhymes and repeats in the weirdest ways.
It does.
So anyway.
So we used AI to go, what countries out of the 100... Well, there's like 124 signed, but it's like it picked the countries that actually it has the data on of supporting the Catholic Church and which ones oppose it. So in the supporting countries, you have Andorra, Argentina, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica. You have a bunch of countries. And the opposed, of course, you can have a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, or even like Bangladesh or China, Iran, Japan, Jordan, or the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom left the Catholic Church, right? And created the Church of England.
Official state of
So
church,
then we had to do a graph that 68% support the Catholic Church that are part of the ICC. 38% oppose, and 6% are mixed or neutral. And the reason why I felt like doing that was because I went, okay, the Pope just came out with his first interview to an American press of all time ever. Never happened before. And then a day after, the ICC prosecution comes out, and now you have all these countries, including France, supporting this. What's also interesting is, I think it's right here. Oh, well, there's some overlap of like the old power of the church. So when they just brought out the new norms of proceeding, there was also the Council of Trent about how purgatory goes. What year was that?
So the Council of Trent, the Pope tried to convene it in 1537, I think, but it didn't start actually until, I don't remember the date. I'm getting, because 1565 is when it ends.
But that's interesting because it's during the time that we're walking into.
Right. So 1545 was when it finally got convened.
Got you.
Yeah, but it was called earlier.
So at 1545, so that's still Pluto and Aquarius.
And the purpose of the Council of Trent was to try to go down the list of every Protestant critique and say, oh, is there anything here? Like doing the discerning of, so did the Protestants make a good point here? But at the very end, they proclaimed all of the existing doctrines and again, reaffirmed them and made their church better, made their church better educated. They had the Jesuits by then who were really sort of like the ones who would missionize and spread the idea of the Pope. They are influenced by in a very
Pope
militaristic
Francis is
way.
a Jesuit, an ex-Jesuit.
Right. Yeah. And I thought it was really interesting. I was reading his papal address. I don't know whatever it's called that he does every Wednesday. I was reading it from last year at this time, and he focused on Francis Xavier, Saint Francis Xavier.
Which he named himself after that.
Right. And talked all about how he was this great missionary who ended up dying at the gates of China, in China.
Because he was about the poor. He was about helping the poor, the sick, the children.
Yeah, so he was going out in the world to spread Catholicism, and what the Pope was trying to say is, be like this guy. You don't have to do these great deeds. You can just be a missionary in your normal life. You just.
He even says that it's okay to be poor. Like you don't have to.
Right. And that the Pope. That was even in the 60 Minutes interview, right? Where they tried to say, hey, he's just like us. He doesn't live in the Vatican. He has like
he's in the guest house where the guests sleep.
But still. I
almost feel like you're trying too hard, in my opinion. Like you're making it more abrasive. Like you're going against the flow. The flow is you're the Pope. If God chose you, and that's the way that God had made it through all the popes prior to you, then if it was real, then you wouldn't go against God's way.
But he's adapting. He's adapting to what he thinks he needs to do, which is like that survival mechanism of the church.
Correct.
It's so funny too, because I don't know. I wanted to bring up the letters that you were talking about
earlier. I'm going to bring them up.
So we'll talk about it when we get there. So let's look at
So what we did was we took the overlap of what just came out with the new norms and how to proceed, and then the Council of Trent, and said, find the common dots to connect and what are the themes that are in common. And it's about the role of what the bishops do for validation in the proceedings of the norms that are now. And in the Council of Trent, it was the role of the bishops with the doctrine. Where they overlap is the approval and the regulation to avoid superstition and to maintain the piety. So it might seem simple, but it's not. It's exactly the same reaffirming and how to approve and to regulate and how to avoid any superstition, because that's what things outside the Catholic Church that were saying they were Christian was the Quakers, the Pilgrims, all these new versions of Christianity were a threat and superstition, right?
Well, they were critiquing the church for being superstitious, right? For, having transubstantiation or having communion where the priest does magic. And so it's going to show it knows there's actual supernatural sort of things. But then there's not. Right,
so here's another way to look at it is that the Council of Trent at the top, the norms for proceeding, both are to avoid superstition, both are to maintain the piety, both are about approval and regulation, and both are about the bishop's role in both, whether it's the doctrine. But I would say there's the doctrine that's built into the new norms as well. They have to follow the doctrine.
Yeah, but it's interesting because there's a huge difference between the bishops getting to determine doctrine and the bishops just validating. So now the bishops are just rubber stamping the discernment committee's findings.
Correct.
But basically the popes.
Right. And then, so I had ChatGPT take a summary of the norms for proceeding in the discernment, and that it allowed discernment of spiritual fruits, acknowledging the positive spiritual fruits such as growth in faith, devotion, fraternity, and service from alleged supernatural phenomena, promotion of valid phenomena, encouraging and promoting phenomena with pastoral value under the guidance of the diocesan bishop with possible pilgrimages to sacred sites. Oh, that's bringing back going to Jerusalem.
Right.
This is where I'm it's not a conspiracy. It's an astrology. Like, this is what I've been trying to warn for 2 years, really hardcore. And I feel like it's happening now. Then careful investigation and study of phenomena with potential supernatural origin by the diocesan bishop and competent ecclesiastical authorities. Not allowed exploitation for personal gain. We already covered that. Manipulation and abuse, and the errors of any of the. There's a part about the doctrine again, right? So, simplification of the gospel message or fostering a sectarian mentality. That was just like a basic summary that it did.
Oh, that was not allowed. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Allowed and not allowed.
So this is where it gets a little weird, right? So Hitler letters to Pope. So this was news last year. Same thing. Pluto came into Aquarius. Neptune's near the end of Pisces. Uranus and Taurus. Right? The letter shows that Pope Pius XII had detailed information from German Jesuit about Nazi Holocaust. Now, throughout the last 50 plus years, the Vatican has said, and people around the world have said, that the Pope knew nothing about the Holocaust happening because he never spoke about it. Right? The documentation from the Vatican archives published this weekend in the Italian Daily is likely to further fuel the debate about the Pius's legacy and the stalled beautification campaign for him, that it shows that there was a letter dated December 14th, 1942 from the German Jesuit priest to Pius' secretary, which is contained in an upcoming book about the newly opened files of the Pius, a researcher and archivist. But it says that it represented detailed correspondence about the Nazi extermination of Jews, including in ovens, from an informed church source in Germany who was part of the Catholic anti-Hitler resistance that was able to get otherwise secret information to the Vatican. Then it talks about the secret meetings that the Pope was having, talking with these different, it's everybody from Hitler to all these other people that were never put into the record but found. So this story just wiped through, because you know why? This story came out a month before October 6th, weeks before. Right? It's a little weird. What's weirder is then the Pope just recently, on his views of Israel, he's playing the neutral card again, but he is telling the world that it has gone beyond war to terrorism. So he doesn't agree with Israel, right? That's of the November 22nd. No peace in Israel and Palestine without two-state solution.
Well, I think, is he saying Israel, like the terrorism's on both sides? Is he trying to say?
Well, he's playing the middle, but by playing in the midst.
He's in the midst of this conflict.
He's in the midst of this conflict, correct.
Yeah.
Right? The Pope's statement comes after he met too. So he was saying that the head of the suffers a lot, adding that in the Middle East, we have gone beyond wars and are at terrorism. Let us pray for the Palestinian people. Let us pray for the Israeli people so that peace may come. That's exactly what the Pope Pius was saying.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So it's the same Uranus and Taurus. And then especially for the dear peoples of Ukraine, the tortured Ukraine. Now he brought up about the children of Ukraine and all these things. What's really interesting to me is now that Germany is able to have their troops out. Now Germany's the one saying, we'll arrest the head of the Israeli state.
I mean, just
in the same astrology, and that he's the bad one.
This is what
he's not saying
know so
about,
much about that.
We'll arrest anybody from Hamas.
No. But who decided that, who thought it'd be a good idea to send Germany to do it? Like
the Ukraine with Jupiter, Neptune. What you and I did 2 years ago is show that we just had that transit in Pisces, both the rulers of that. Last time it happened was 1856. Then you go back into the history of when you see Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and that gets to the Black Plague in the 1340s, that we had that conjunction happen in 2020. And remember when we looked, it all is where Ukraine in the war is where the Black Plague started. Mm-hmm. Right? That's exactly where where the East and the West met. And the Black Plague started. To me, the Ukraine thing got people to forget about Germany's World War II stuff, to allow them with NATO to get all their military to be like, we need all the help we can get. The other countries are Norway, right? So Norway in the ICC, and France, and Germany. And then there was another one we were talking about. Is
Italy in there too? You have your graph and list.
West divided 17. Well, my list was just
a lot of different
Let me just
nations.
know out of all who is part of the ICC, who's for the Catholic Church. Because the question is, did the Catholic Church dissolve its power, or did it just put it into something like the ICC through all these countries, the same way that it did back in the 1200s of you got guys that are going to join this holy war. So
exactly,
it's the same thing that people aren't seeing my astrological. Well, they think I'm crazy when I think that the Catholic Church is behind.
But listen, that's why I feel like the letter from Pius, or the letter from World War II, is important, because it says one thing in there, that he had information from a Jesuit, and I'm not trying to talk about Jesuit conspiracies, but he had information about what was happening. So at all times, the church is getting information, its own inside information with its own spies.
Yep.
And you said this is a transit of spies as well, right?
Correct.
And I'm not saying they're not doing it deviously. It's, if you're going to protect your organization, you need to know what's going on in the world, right? And if you're trying to, let's just look at it from their perspective of, if you want to save souls, you need to know where our soul's in danger. But then also, you think, okay, well, we're a Christian organization. We can't necessarily go in and attack. We can't just advocate for terrorism or whatever. We're going to have to take a neutral stance. But in that article that talked about the letter from World War II, it said suddenly, okay, not only did they know what was going on, but the Pope previously, or the Vatican had previously said, Yes, we knew something was up, and we were working behind the scenes to try to make it better. Right. And now, so are we to assume today they don't work behind the scenes? There's evidence of them working behind the scenes, and this is what they did with the Council of Trent. They have a network. It has its own administrative network that supports it, and the point of it is to keep it surviving, right? So
the way that I look at it too is when you take the list of countries, you automatically know in this list that the ones that oppose it are all the ones in the Middle East and all on the other side of it, meaning that they really support Palestine. So what you do is you get everybody in that ICC to go, okay, let's get rid of it. You know why? As said just recently in the most new norms, to start to create sacred site visits. Pilgrimages. What I believe is happening is that this is a way for the Catholic Church to make the two-state solution, but screw over the Middle East and all that, but give them what they kind of want. But who will take over Jerusalem? Germany, the West, and the Catholic Church will set up a Christian state for pilgrimage and give the Palestinians
but it's
land.
there already, right?
Right.
So they want to ensure
but they want to ensure it fully.
Yeah.
Because why would the Catholic Church had a problem at the very end of one of the articles with that people in the Vatican at that time were anti-Semitic, and that's another reason why they didn't say anything, that they actually, I don't want to say this, but it is insinuating that these Jesuits and a bunch of them wanted it to happen. Now, this is what's weird, is this all came out a month before October 6th, right? Or October 7th, a month before.
And the other thing is that this comes after a long history of knowing the Roman Catholic Church even supported things like in the Inquisitions, right? Where there's the forced conversion of Jewish people or Muslim people, or trying to support Portugal, for example, during some of the transits we're talking about, or just a little bit before. The Vatican instituted the Portuguese Inquisition to try to help Portugal deal with the problem of Moors, which are Muslim people, right? And then also there's inquisitions against Jewish people. But the Roman Catholic Church's perspective was always, well, let's get them to convert. And then when they convert, we'll support their existence in certain regions. But also there were pogroms that would break out in Europe. And all these things were happening with the sanction of the Roman Catholic Church in different parts of history. So
there's the archives where a bunch of his stuff was done, the tens of thousands of documents related to it in the Vatican.
Apostolic
archives.
Wouldn't you love to go there? Because they have information.
I've had dreams about going there.
We need to start working on remote viewing the Vatican archives or something. I know people do that out there, and they. But see,
this is what they're saying at the beginning of 1942. Few people, including Jews, understood that Hitler wanted to exterminate the Jews. But as the year progressed, there was a growing association between the words Jew and death in these reports. Which, that's the year, that's the moment that he gets the word, what's going to happen, and he doesn't do anything or say anything about it. And then, I don't think it's in this article. I think it's in the other one I found here that that inside the Vatican, they have other reports about it right here. In a large part of the Vatican world, prejudice against Jews stagnated, not only on a religious level, but sometimes also anti-Semitic. Right? That more documents are still to come out. But what's crazy is in that 42 letters, a broader set of papers from his papacy set to be published by the Vatican archives today will also likely be discussed on October 9th through 11th, the International Conference of Rome's Jesuit run, which is Rome's, the ICC is a Roman
The Rome statute. Yeah.
Which, if you understand the Bible, the Romans and the Jews don't like each other. That's the whole battle.
Right. And then, I was looking up, well, why did they choose to convene the ICC in Rome? And
but then
what I
use
found,
the Netherlands. That's
right?
the whole history repeating itself.
But why do they? So yeah, exactly. It's the same Spanish road. Like there was a map of where Spain or the Habsburgs wanted to have a line that goes up to the Netherlands, so they always had access up there. But what was I going to say? Why I got the message back on ChatGPT about why Rome was all about, it was the center of the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire was all about law. And so it would make sense for this legal organization to meet in Rome. And so then I asked, but was the Vatican involved? And it said something like, well, it was aware of it happening, and they, but it doesn't say specifically.
Well, the reason why the United States and Israel are not on there is because they believe in sovereign law of your own countries.
Right.
And there is no international law that should dictate. Just the same thing with the WHO treaty that's trying to happen next week. But what's even more interesting too is that why would they put out, we need to protect the church from it being seen from phenomenon, or make sure that it's not seen as a what was the term, like that it's trying to break the unification of the church or to make the church look bad. The new documents from the pontificate of Pius XII and their significance for Jewish-Christian relations. But what you don't see is, because this is before October 7th, then they meet 2 days after for the international comments of Rome's Jesuit run, where it was it was Jesuits, right? And who is the Pope? A Jesuit? That's rare. You don't see a lot of Jesuit popes. And then on top of it, now you have it to where you see the Pope constantly bringing up a two-state solution, putting them down, and you don't see him right now saying, "Oh, don't go after." And he said, "Ideology is bad, but you can criticize all you want, but you can't be anti-Semitic and you can't be, anti-human. But you can go after whoever you want to." Criticizing wise.
So if we think about what he said in that 60 Minutes interview, do you think it's the same line that we see in all of these different stages where, so if we take the example of him talking about gay marriage and how, the Catholic reporter asked, I love how she announces that she's Catholic at the beginning, right?
From North Ireland, yeah.
But
Irish.
She asks, what do you do about the fact that, or she had heard that he was advocating for blessing gay marriages or gay unions, right? And he specifically said, well, we're against, that's a sacrament, but we don't have any problem blessing this individual and this individual, but not the actual union.
Yeah, he said, todos, let all people come in. But we might not agree with what they do, and there's things that they might be sinning, but let them come in.
Right.
So basically now it's like, let anybody come, but we won't say that your love for another person is not right, but we'll love you individually.
And that's a pretty common Christian stance in some evangelical branches as well, right? Love the sinner but hate the sin, right?
Well, that's the question. Is the Catholic Church just reformed itself to be more Protestant with the old doctrine, but putting out the tone that resonates with more of the wider Christian community, to have it back where it's using its silent hand in a court that all the countries on the majority support the Catholic Church, and the countries that don't support it will support this exact same warrant?
Good question. And I mean, the reason I'm going to the whole doctrinal thing is just that I feel like what we're seeing is what you just mentioned. Okay, are they just trying to be a little bit more Protestant to survive? But if they are, they're going against what they did in the Council of Trent in 1565 at the very end of it. But see, what we're seeing right now is the beginning. And actually, I just had a light bulb moment at the very beginning of the Council of Trent. The church was trying to say, hey, maybe we can figure out our differences and we can all still be one church. So they were saying publicly in the 1530s, let's try to work this out and have a solution where we can all be Christians together and we can still belong to the same church. But by 1565, the doctrine was set that, nope, we can't get along. We're separate. We reaffirm everything we already believed. And you Protestants are, whatever. We're going to go attack England, or I support Spain when they attack England in the 1580s. Right. Or, they did work behind the scenes then as well.
Support Spain, Portugal, going into the Maya and decimating and killing all the Mayan and taking that over, making them all Catholic. And
yeah,
that's why the whole Mexico and all of South America is all converted to Catholicism because of the same transits of Eris where it's at now. That's the repeat.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like the support system is to the point to where, what do you tell the Jews if you arrest the prime minister and then they've been labeled so bad? As you get the ICC to do it, you get the countries. It's the same thing as looking at it like the old days of going into the Crusades, right? Because what do? You have Ukraine and you just say, well, we're just going to move all you Jews to Ukraine. That'll be your new Zion. And we're looking after this new place because we have a good name. We're cool with the Muslims, and we found a two-state solution by getting you out.
Is that what you think is going to happen?
That's what I think is going to happen.
Wow.
Because you have right now, as we're talking, the most unfathomable thing. The Germans armed back up for the first time a month ago since World War II, saying, we will execute the warrant. Now, the warrant is not for just Netanyahu. It's for his defense minister and for all the leaders of Hamas, which are not democratically elected. They're terrorists. You don't see them saying, oh, yeah, I'll execute the warrant on the Hamas guys.
No.
They're all saying, we support the ICC, but the one country saying they'll execute it is Germany. And this is the astrology of where Germany invaded Poland and went into France, ironically enough. What's even more interesting to me about it all is, okay, you have all that, but you have this moment here where it's like, okay, the astrology is showing that this becomes this, at the end of the day, how do you get Christians to get over their Old Testament connection to the Jewish people? It's already so far gone from that. Most people are just into Christ so far. Right?
Sorry, I just had another realization, but yeah.
This is what I got to bring up. What happened this weekend? The president of Iran and his cabinet and his foreign minister all die in a helicopter crash.
Right. Yeah, I saw someone bringing that up in the chat. Yep.
There is no coincidence. This is all how World War I started with all the, because I'm sure they're going to come out and say, Netanyahu shot that down. Right? Everybody's been really silent. The Ayatollah, who's super old, but he's an Aries. Iran's an Aries country, right? Even though that president was extreme, the Ayatollah is the most extreme. So right now, they're going to take 50 days to make a new vote in Iran. The Ayatollah, who is the supreme leader, has got now his full supreme authority. He's the one who's made the speeches, and then they fired on Israel. The first country to fire on Israel, right? And for what we've seen in our lives, a country from their home launching into another home, like a major country, like Iran firing into Israel and Israel firing into Iran. But then you saw all these other countries support Israel, but now you're seeing them go, no, we're not. So what if Iran fires again? Is France going to help?
I don't know.
Is Germany going to help? So to me, this is that Uranus and Taurus where I've always said, you will never believe the alliances and the breakups of countries that will come together. And that's exactly what happened at the end of Uranus and Taurus in 1940 into 41, right? Like you never thought America and Russia or USSR would go against Hitler.
Right.
Well, what are the countries that aren't part of this ICC? America, Russia, Iran, China. Right? Like,
yeah.
Like what? I don't think people see it yet, but this is obviously, and again, America never has been a quote unquote Christian nation, right? You can try and say it, but it's actually really enforced in the Federalist Papers and in all that it's not based upon a religion. There is no church.
Well, it has
for America.
Freedom for religion, right? So
it is freedom
can
for
be here and be religious.
Right? Any religion you want, right? So the America does not say it's Christian in any document. There is no part of the Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, right? They just say in God, that God. They just say God. Mm-hmm. That's it. So, of course, the Catholic Church doesn't like America. Plus, what was in the interview? All of the things that the bishops of America are not agreeing with the Pope with about how he's being so loose on certain things, so many of it, right? So my whole thing here is like, this is history about to repeat itself in the craziest way because everybody thinks like, oh, Israel, Zionist against the Palestinians. It's never been that. It's been about how to take the Jews out the same way it was last time. And let's not forget the expansion of the Nazi Empire that happened with Uranus at the end of Taurus.
Well, I know
it took over all of Europe. And now what's happening in the minds and in the thing, and the same words out of Mein Kampf are being said by every pro-Palestinian person. The same words. They don't know they're saying Mein Kampf, but it's the exact same words against Zionism. They have all the money. They own this. They own that. Well, they obviously don't own enough of it. The Catholic Church has its hand in another way. That's my whole point.
Yeah. So I don't even remember what I know what I was going to say. The thing we did not say, and I've heard you mention this before, what was Hitler trying to do in the first place? He was trying to bring back the Roman Empire, basically, right? Trying to bring back like a Holy Roman Emperor type of guy. And then the thing is like, so this is all, I don't even know what you call it in astrology, whatever your dissertation on.
Well, where was a bunch of the Holy Roman Emperor energy? Germany?
Yeah. They are kind of the heirs of that whole thing.
I know.
So now they're kind of turning on it. But the thing is, like before, so people could look at this and say, well, but it's not a holy war because these people aren't doing it in the name of religion, or it's not the Catholic Church really doing it. But what it is like it's a new overarching, like we can just look at it as the same things repeating, but with a different external power that's visible, right? And in the past, it's not always that the Roman Catholic Church they never were seen to be the ones pushing things. Like if it's an inquisition, you establish this idea of, oh, we can have an inquisition, but the secular rulers are going to have to call us in to make us do it.
Right.
they didn't just police around and show up and say, hey, the Pope is here to control what you people are doing. It was, the noble said, hey, we need an inquisition. These Cathars are getting out of control, or whatever it was.
Or in the Crusades, it was a French king.
Right.
Who decides to go to the crusade and gather all of the other countrymen from other countries that are under the Catholic Church to go do the crusades against in the same Holy Land that they're going after.
But now we have like the ICC.
And now it's a French Macron who's trying to be Napoleon.
Right. Well, he has his own Josephine too. I don't know.
Him, her, yeah.
But
his teacher.
The ICC... I'm sure we should do a show on that again. I don't know. We talked about Napoleon once, right?
Yeah.
But okay, so the ICC is doing this in the name of a religion of human rights or what
genocide,
is it called?
Human rights,
sort of,
and war crimes.
Mm-hmm. So things that most of us would say, well, that's a really great thing. We don't want there to be war crimes. We don't want there to be terrorism. We want people to abide by the conventions of how we should kill each other or whatever it is. But, it's something that on the surface, it looks like if we were living in the 1520s, we might be sitting there going, wow, my priest is a great guy. What are these people having a revolution about? You know? But at the time you don't see what in the future people are going to look back and say, well, history was repeating and they didn't even notice. That's why when people say it repeats, I always think, things repeat, but we always think we're going to be the person that stops the next Hitler. And we're not. Because we don't always see the next Hitler. And when people do, and they're looking at the astrology and all of that, everyone says, well, that guy, it doesn't know what he's talking about. We don't do astrology anymore. That's not science or whatever.
Right.
Right. It's very hard to see clearly what is happening in the moment in which we're living, because we have to remember, like the American Revolution was fought by people, many of them who owned slaves or, and so we look back, like, how could they do that and fight for, and say they were for freedom. Where did you find that?
The pictures of...
Is that AI generated? Can we authenticate
no, this
that?
is not. Right before all this went down, the Pope met with Hitler. Let's not forget that the Olympics in Berlin that happened in the 30s, the whole world went to Berlin and went to a Nazi Olympics and participated in Nazi Olympics. Right? And if you just go 2024 summer Olympics, right? We're in an Olympics year because 2028 they're here, right? So in Paris, who was the owner of Paris in the Uranus transit we're in now? The Nazis. This is the Nazi Paris Olympics 2024. When you have France and the ICC, what did they say? France supports Netanyahu arrest warrant and break with Western allies. There you go. And who do all these people support? France, all that is... I'm just going to open up Pandora's box and end it with this. But if you just go... Okay. The Ukraine Nazis are everywhere. And what are all the big countries? Right? Like Netanyahu won't even take talks with Zelensky because there's Nazis there. Right? I'm not going to use Putin as a source, but Putin made it clear with his interview with Tucker about the Nazis. But if you've been following the war for the last 2 years, it's been nonstop Nazis that are in Ukraine. So when you have the French troops into Ukraine, this was just 2 weeks ago. that Macron reaffirms possibility of sending troops to Ukraine. Macron again declines to rule out Western troops in Ukraine. Oh, okay. Macron doesn't rule out troops for Ukraine. The fact that people can't see this in my mind is crazy. That they believe the story at the front, which is, oh my God, Hamas has done this, but look at what's happening to the Palestinians. It's actually going to be crazier. They're going to get their wish, and it's not going to be the wish they want. They're going to get a two-state solution, and it's not going to be them getting their land back. It's going to be that still land, all crapped out, and you're going to see these Western Ukrainian-style Jesuit Catholic countries have control of the Holy Land and be charging all the money like they used to and the tickets to come on the beaches of Jerusalem.
And the other thing is
the Olympics in Paris.
Yeah.
Because it was the exact transit of 1940, right? Hitler in Paris, right? Here, I hate to use history, but I love it. The fall of France, June of 1940. Next month, this is all about to go crazy. And if I just go, watch this. I'm going to just do the astrology. Ready? Because this summer is the Paris Olympics. So when this chart that I'm going to run, I'm not going to name it, but we'll just do it. We'll do June of 1940. And we look at it. Pluto at 1. Where is Pluto today? 1 degrees Aquarius, in the exact opposition. Uranus is at 23 degrees right now as you and I are talking in 48 minutes. I'll pull it up in a second, of Taurus.
That's 1940, huh? And
yes.
Jupiter and Saturn are in the same, or no, Jupiter's in the same place, right?
And Jupiter was in Taurus at that time. Jupiter's in Taurus right now, as all this came out. And Uranus in the same sign.
Oh, and
in the same degree of Uranus.
Those nodes are flipped too. Does that mean
yes,
anything?
just as much as Pluto is flipped exactly on the opposite side.
That's so weird.
Or Neptune's flipped exactly on the opposite side. So that's why it looks different, but it's the same.
So who will we see sitting in front of the Eiffel Tower and having their picture taken?
I think that we are going to see within a year's time. I'll give it a year's time, but I wouldn't be surprised with the extremes of where we're at right now over the next 2 to 3 months. But I think that the one would be the most unpredictable is before the Pope dies, the Pope in Jerusalem for a two-state solution and the Jews being told to leave and Netanyahu behind bars and no more Jewish state. And it will be not because of international laws. It'll be because of the Catholic Church wanted their land back like I predicted for years.
Well,
I know I sound crazy,
but I
mean,
that's the part that people wouldn't see if that's happening.
That's
right?
the astrology is showing that the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of Capricorn in 1284 is about the chip on the shoulder of the Catholic Church of losing the Holy Land. Because it never got it back. Never got it back. It only did by putting the Jews in there, supporting them with 1947 and what they did, and supplying the arms like they do to Ukraine right now, right? But what's even more interesting is that got a footing in there, and now, thanks for your service. For some reason, this is the astrology of bye-bye.
Right. Well, I mean, is there a chance you could have a neutral, like they could decide, well, we need a neutral organization
North Node Aries
to police it,
No.
but then you choose the Roman Catholic Church and a representative from other churches.
No.
So you could
Because
create.
Pluto's coming back into Capricorn and North Node's in Aries. That's all out war and control.
Oh, also,
So
I
the
noticed.
institutions are going to crumble that they want to crumble, and they're going to force the control that they want as hard as they can. That means this has all been a setup. And look at how easy they were able to get everybody to believe in America, Black Lives Matter, the same thing that they did with pro-Palestine movement and to look like Israel's doing this wrong thing when there could be this whole other play and even AI involved. And that's why the Catholic Church puts, don't believe everything. You see?
What is okay, I forgot that Kareem Khan, who's the I don't know what he is for the ICC, the head
Oh, right.
criminal defense guy or whatever.
An Aries. That's North Node's coming on top of his sun in the next couple months. Oh, how ironic is that? And he has Pluto at the end of Virgo, which means Neptune's opposing his Pluto. I can do that in my head. 1970, that's Pluto at 27 degrees, 26 degrees of Virgo. Neptune just opposed it. That means that his secret that he had to do backdoor Neptune opposed Pluto just happened. It's finished. This has been planned out for years.
Wow.
And this is his big moment where he's going to be, in the next 2 months, you're going to see this guy be all over TV 24/7.
So he might be the one at the Olympics in front of the Eiffel Tower. I'm waiting for that picture to show up again.
And where's he from? That's going to be the answer.
From Edinburgh, Scotland. I looked that up too.
Well, what's his origin? Everything with Pluto and Aquarius is about somebody's origin, right? Like George Washington's origin was Britain. You know what I mean?
They don't say anything. I don't know. Would he be from a family from Pakistan?
His relatives are Iman. See? This is so easy.
Where is it? Am I showing it?
In Iraq. Oh, yeah. I mean, like, if you go to relatives to the right.
Oh, I see.
Iman Hamad Khan, who's working with the West, right? And he's a British former politician and convicted sex offender. There you go.
He served as a member of parliament for Wakefield. Okay.
And what did they just do? I forgot in which country did they get rid of you're allowed to possess child porn. It came out today. I couldn't believe it.
He was sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy in 2008.
Sounds like the Catholic Church.
Oh my gosh. Oh. He was a counterterrorism expert prior to becoming a sex offender or an MP.
There was a country today that I saw on Twitter that just got rid of child porn, like possession of it.
Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court.
But my whole point about that stuff is that's the kind of stuff that people aren't seeing, right?
He dropped the investigation into the United States use of in-secret CIA prisons in Poland. What is the Pope's astrology?
Oh, he's a Sag. I mean, he's at the end of his reign, right? That's why he's saying these things are coming out.
Is that his chart?
Oh no, I don't have it up, but I to me, it's not so much about what he's doing. He's been the setup. Remember, in 500 years, this is the first time you could be witness to watching a Pope Benedict leave being the Pope and watch a Pope resign, right? There's been talks about Francis saying he's going to resign. That would be unprecedented. 2 in a row.
Right.
Right? But he's a setup for everything's been a setup. Pluto and Capricorn's always a setup, right? So it's a setup. It's a setup. December 17th, 1936. Oh, so yeah, he's Pluto in Cancer. He's the end of Sag, which he has Neptune squaring his sun right now, this means this guy's lost. He's definitely not hitting the toilet with his pee.
Could it also be that he's highly spiritual while that's happening?
No. This is where he's actually lost. He's not knowing even what to really do about things. Other people are doing it for him. Right? He's 87. He's past Uranus opposition. They say once you go past these times that you just go into, you're not even really here. You're here, but you're here, not here. You're in another space.
So he's really in touch with supernatural miracles. He knows how to discern them. I
mean, I could just run his chart really quick, right? Like, what is it? December 17th, 1936.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not going to go off like time or anything. I'm just going to go off noon and just where I'm at. I don't care. When I do these charts, I don't need all that.
What does it say? Pope Francis' wife as
stuff to tell you how somebody is. He is sun 25 degrees. So Neptune just finished squaring his sun. He's got Jupiter and Mercury there in Capricorn. The moon, definitely for sure that day, was in Aquarius. And he has Venus in Aquarius. So Pluto's approaching his Venus. His Mars in Libra. The South Node's been all over that.
Did he just have a Saturn return also, or?
Yeah, he's in a Saturn return right now. It's coming back.
You did mention that.
And that's the same degree of where Saturn was during the heresy laws.
So what are the next norms coming out, I wonder?
That I think that's him preparing for the next doctrine of whatever might be. But see, he has Pluto at 28 Cancer, and Pluto's been in opposition. His views are against the generation he's currently. That's Pluto opposite Pluto, right? So, and he has Uranus and Taurus at 5 degrees, where the lunar eclipse was in Taurus, where Jupiter went direct, and where we just saw a Venus cross and everything. So, he was alive he's 4 years old watching.
From
Hitler going
Argentina.
to France.
Where was he? In Argentina?
Yeah, he was in Argentina.
Interesting.
Where all the Nazis ended up.
Well, wasn't there something about that? Isn't he? No, I'm
That's
thinking
where they all ended up.
Right.
Hello.
I don't know what else to say.
I mean, to me, his chart does not scream at me. He's a placeholder. That's a placeholder chart. When you see somebody's chart all spread out like that, it's a placeholder. He's just here to be a cup as the background in a movie on a table.
What about the Sagittarian element? Is he just supposed to be
with that North Node there? Yeah, I mean, hello, todos, everyone, everything, todos. But he has Jupiter in Capricorn, so that disposits Jupiter in Capricorn. It means he has a very big agenda that seems like it's not. Just seems like everything's just happening. It's a phenomenon. Even though, I mean, I've spent my whole life being a Jesuit and having secret meetings and, like he's the kind of guy with Saturn opposite Neptune as well. And Saturn and Neptune are in conjunction. So this is the opposite of what he's in. And it's happening on a Saturn return. I don't know his time, or I'm not using his ascendant or his house system, but I can use his solar house system. It's happening in his 4th house solar wise. So like this is him trying to establish the church's home or reclaim its spiritual home. Now, what I haven't answered is, will they be successful in this whole plot? I don't think so. That's where I believe at the end of the day, America, Russia, and even possibly China might come together. And I know people think I'm fucking crazy saying that.
Well, but really it's the idea of, is this a function that NATO should do, right? Should this international group come together and extract a leader, attempt to do just that level of it, I can see how the United States would oppose that. But I don't know. I mean, because I think you said in Congress,
they're going
right?
to put up a bill in Congress that would actually put sanctions on the ICC. But there's problems because of Bernie Sanders, who wants Netanyahu to be arrested, and other Democrats. But the president and the Secretary of State, Blinken, all agree with the Republicans on doing a bipartisan bill. So a lot of them have taken that stand, but then a lot of them not. But, Bernie Sanders is from Austria and Hungary, his family originally. His mother's parents were Jews, but he's not Jew. And his other side of the family were pure old tin hat wearing, steel hat wearing, Hungarian, Austrian, old guard. People never want to look at people's origins, but that's Bernie Sanders.
And you said we need to look at origins because of
Pluto and Aquarius.
Wow. I mean, it's funny that my origins are Mennonite, right? My mom was a Mennonite. So she goes back to the Anabaptists.
Yeah.
Right? Your origins are all those radical English folk and many different
Dutch
types of
and
Protestants.
Indonesians,
But I just had this revelation that we'll have to talk about in another show probably, that, Henry VIII's thing about his divorce was sort of the role, if we are going to go against the idea of this group extricating a ruler from another country, like that is going against this external body having the rights to interfere in another country, right?
Or to me, it reminds me of when Henry left the church. This is the ICC of all those countries, which is a majority of the world, saying we don't recognize Israel as a Jewish state. The same way that Henry didn't recognize the Catholic Church as anything anymore.
Right. And his argument was they shouldn't have, according to Magna Carta and all of that, right? You shouldn't have an external body telling the English monarch what to do.
Right.
And it went against their own.
Well, and now the ICC is trying to add to the charges people in the British Parliament for being complacent to it. So what do you think is going to happen next? Oh, no, America, you're part of it because you supplied weapons. That's what people don't see. Right. It's like, that's what's happening right now. And that's what's going to be the holy moly, holy war that I've been saying. And I said that the Catholic Church will be in the middle of the whole thing about because you have to remember that Holy Land's been contested by let's just say the Muslims, and that goes pretty far out in all the Arabic world, right? It can go in a lot of different directions. The Catholics, not the Christians, the Catholics. There was no holy war with Christians. They were Catholics because it was the Catholic Church funded and the ideas. And then you have the Jewish people. So all three are in contesting that area. But who's going to make the deal? The Catholics are making the deal with the Muslims, like they always have. And so people look at the Jews. That's what Nazi Germany did, right? Because Nazi Germany just walked into whatever, and who picked up that area? It had it forever was the UK. And after the war, then the UK said, "Oh, here you guys go." Right? So it's going to be a two-state solution, but it ain't going to be. From what they're trying to do right now is they played the whole world's fiddle perfect. Made everybody believe it's something when I believe half of it's been AI video. I still have not seen one 4K video in Gaza. It all is like the Sora on OpenAI of the drone shot. It's fuzzy. Everybody on the ground, it's fuzzy. Right? No state media is allowed in. out of country. So who's supplying in an area, right? Like, why is it just Al Jazeera showing all this stuff? That's a Muslim-run media, and fueling and using TikTok. That's where this gets really fuzzy.
There are videos of just like, I'm thinking of the protests at the colleges where I watched a lot of what was happening at UCLA, watching, I guess, independent journalists live streaming from.
Right.
And what I saw on those live streams was nothing that was reported.
No.
Right. So aren't there live stream videos from Gaza, from what's happening there?
No, they're all, half of them, you look at them, they're all AI because the background moves or they have clawed hands. Or the drone footage is really easy when you do buildings that have been demolished because it's blurry. They don't have to do clear windows and seeing a person in it and all that shit. So like if you go to OpenAI for Sora on their webpage, or I could just do that for people really quick. I mean, like that, like the one thing that why they haven't released Sora is the big question. Like they're saying it's because this is the biggest election year in the world, right? The most elections this year are happening around the world, right? So it's like, okay, so I can understand that, right? Like that's interesting. But for the YouTube people out there, because they don't know that I talk about this a lot on High Vibe, but so you can do this right now, but we can't. Only people in the entertainment industry can. So they made deals to where they introduced Sora earlier this year. It's where it's text to video, right? But becoming available to red teamers to assess critical areas for harms or risks. We are also granting access to a number of visual artists, designers, and filmmakers to gain feedback on how to advance the model. Okay? So one of the things is, here's a historic footage of California during the gold rush. There was no gold rush video.
Right.
What is it? A drone shot with people. There was no such video. Right? Mm-hmm. So whenever you look at like one of these is so crazy, I couldn't believe it. It was like, or like, you know, like all of this stuff, that's the California coast that doesn't exist. And that's clearer than the videos you're seeing in Gaza, right? Or when I bring up the drone footage, like, here we go. This is a good example. A beautiful homemade video showing the people of Lagos in Nigeria in the year 2056 shot with a mobile phone camera. These are not real people. They don't exist. And see how they do with the background and they do everything? One thing that you can tell it's AI is the frame rate. It's never 29, 24, 29, like 94 or 30, let's say, 24 or 60p. It's always like 54, 26, because I work in AI. So you can tell by the frame rates how it's AI and how the people move. If you watch the Gaza videos, you're going to notice the same feeling, but less clear, and drone shots. Right? To make you think, well, there's some people out there with drones that they're doing this no problem. It's like, no, it's like the California gold rush. It never existed. It never happened.
Well, I think that, you know, an important point when you have all these same transits happening also would be to distrust the evidence you're being shown.
Yeah.
I mean, or not distrust it, to question it and evaluate it and do your own discerning. You don't need a pope to discern for you, right? That I think that especially with AI, it's just really interesting that it's the Catholic Church right now who's issuing the norms for how do you discern what's real or what's fake. But it's not. But they're acknowledging, well, you know, it might not even be real, but if it's not hurting people and it's doing good, that's okay. Right?
And at the same time saying anti-Semitism and all that's bad, anti-human's bad, but criticizing governments and their leaders, he encourages the Pope.
Right.
Which is right after you see that, you just see, arrest him. But no talk about the people in Hamas that are part of that.
Is that part of the
That's
interview
what's
that
crazy
you said
to me.
that? I didn't even make that connection.
That was a huge part of that. Was at the very beginning. The first time they brought up Israel is at 3 minutes in the transcript. Right away. What do you think about the Israel conflict right now? I was like, oh, it's so horrible. Ideologies are bad.
Right.
Right. Anti-Semitism. He doesn't even say Islamophobia or anything. He just goes into anything anti-human. But criticism is okay. Now you get everybody just being like, all right, yeah, it's not about the Jews. It's about just this guy.
And now,
Right.
now that I know, we
But
are
now
trusting
you know-
this Neptune square guy. Wait, what was it in this chart that says?
Neptune squaring his sun, Saturn return.
So we're not supposed
Neptune.
to even.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
got to think twice about what he's saying too.
he, if you want to talk about somebody who has a problem discerning from reality and the myths, it's a Saturn in Pisces opposed Neptune in Virgo. Right? Like, that means that he actually doesn't believe in the spiritual nature. He believes more in like, well, I should be getting more credit because I found a way to get you some food. But he doesn't put a spiritual significance to it. It's more of like, I'm following a way that I'm told to be. That doesn't mean that he likes it. He says criticism is okay. Right? So he doesn't have an ideology that's bad, right? It's just more of like, I hate doing this, but I'm supposed to do it.
Well, that would be the Jesuit spiritual exercises of having these rigid guidelines of how to live your life in a way. And I know I'm simplifying it and it's so much more than that, but that's what was introduced by Ignatius of Loyola, around the time that we're talking about in the Reformation, that there are these practical ways of living that could create in you a more spiritual personality, like a more spiritual person. But the emphasis was on the acting it out in the real world, the exercises, the doing it,
Well, and think of the exercise of like, well, how would a Holocaust happen again? Well, you get rid of Netanyahu. You say that they've done such a horrible job and that for protection and safety and the goodness that we've already got a place of land that Zelensky owes all the Western countries a big debt.
And you
right?
don't think it would go the other way?
And you have the occupiers now, right? That everybody says they're occupiers, go to a new place that the people who will watch them are all Nazis.
I didn't think about that. And it can't
and
be.
Zelensky will do it no problem. Oh, by the way, you guys all join the military, man and woman in the IDF. We need troops against Russia.
All right, well.
That's what nobody's realizing is you have the French, you have Macron coming, yeah, let's get Germany, yeah, like we got our troops back since 1945. Let's go. Let's get this guy out. And I was saying this since day one that this would come up, and it finally happened today. I'm like, thank God. I was starting to actually almost be like, that's not going to happen. It happened.
You're saying thank God about all this stuff?
Well, I'm just saying because as an astrologer, right? I mean, that's what I put out. You're going to watch the German way come back. You're going to see the persecution of Jews again. You're going to see the Holocaust again. You're going to see them fucking, and everybody's going to buy it, and everybody's not going to realize it's the Catholic Church buying the whole thing. And remember I said that they're going to do the whole Crusades all over again, and then the paper just comes out, like doing sacred pilgrimages again. Right now, you think doing a sacred pilgrimage would be safe? Going to Jerusalem? Mm-hmm. No. Obviously, that means they got a plan.
Sacred pilgrimaging of all types, right? Because
Buenos Aires and Mexico and wherever there's old people, but people aren't going to want to do that. They're going to want to go to Christ. That's what they love the most. They want to go see where his true cross was found, right? The one that unfortunately was chosen by Constantine's mother, who had a sick woman who begged for her life as she touched different crosses, and the one that she felt a little better touching, they said that's Christ's cross.
But there was an an actual cross. I mean, that's the thing that we always see is there's the actual thing, and then you're told what the actual thing is. So I feel like what we should learn from the astrology is don't listen to what someone's telling you, what you're seeing, right? Or don't just look at evidence and go, oh, yeah, that's what's happening. And then, then you comment on it without you didn't even really watch the video, and then you spread the news more. It's a very similar kind of dynamic as to what you'd see in any period of time where there's a lot of media, whether it's print or AI.
And I know this might sound really crazy, but it's like, I might not go there because it's so crazy, but okay. So you look at Black Lives Matter. As an astrologer, I'm like, this is all control, right? I was saying it. Don't believe this. This is all bullshit. They didn't give any money to any black people. All of Americans gave money to those BLM people, those organizers. And what did they do? They bought homes with it, extravagant gifts for themselves, and they never gave back to any of the community at all. Right? Mm-hmm. It came out years ago and everybody felt, fuck, that's fucked up. Right? So now you have all these people that are like pro-Hamas or pro-Palestine, right? They don't even know why they're there. They just go, I don't know. I'm just told to be here. Right? Everybody believes the story, and then it's going to be a whole different story. And people are going to be like, oh, shit. But it was about Marxism with the BLM stuff. Now you're into Nazism because you're saying Mein Kampf.
Wow.
You're saying everything that Hitler said in Mein Kampf. And what's funny is I think it's like 90% of the population now, because Mein Kampf's not taught, right? Something that, you just don't go out and get, right? The people don't even know what he said in Mein Kampf, right? So,
it's interesting. Can I just make a comment about my textbooks that I've used? There always used to be a segment from Mein Kampf in a textbook that you could read, or a text or some of Hitler's speeches, just so you could see the extreme views that he had, and to let people know he was actually saying it in public, right? That people couldn't say later on, well, we didn't really know what was going on, because he was sharing so much. And it's true that by taking that out of maybe the name of sensitivity at some point of, well, we don't want people to feel hurt or wounded by reading whatever he says. I don't know, that it's hate speech, so we shouldn't have it here. Worrying that people are going to emulate it. Doing that so much has made it so people don't even recognize the same tactics or strategies. And that's one thing I wonder about. What I've been wondering about for a while is how long, are there other situations in history where people have forgotten? I mean, how long is a historical memory? Is it, okay, well, Grandpa who survived the Holocaust is dead now, so we just, 10 years later, okay, we don't remember that anymore. That's just an issue that I've been wondering about, because I think what happens is people kind of get lazy, or they don't think it's important because we all know it already. And I think we don't think often enough about the knowledge we have and letting other people know what's happened in the past. Otherwise, it's so easy just to rewrite the history and then make your video of the ghost mine, or the ghost mine, the gold mine, and everybody's like, wow, there's a video of a gold mine, and nobody knows. Well, they didn't have
it
film back then, or even this quality of video.
No, they had photography, but it was very that much at its inception, and it was not on a crane.
Yeah.
And it took hours for the one frame to be taken.
Exactly.
And it was done indoors mainly, and outdoors was covered with capes, right? But for anybody out there who's saying, well, how's that going to happen with the way that, well, look at America, look at Joe Biden, he's supporting Israel and saying, and right, look at what just showed up today. And this is where this comes into the astrology of what we predicted 2 years ago about the Democratic Convention of the Civil War, that in 1856 with Jupiter and Neptune, they switched Pierce, who was the incumbent president, right? And out of nowhere, they flopped to Buchanan, who was like a Benjamin Franklin, who was like, I was in Europe. I wasn't around for those bleeding Kansas moments. This just came out today. And I'm like, this is how you know. So according to Ohio Secretary of State, Joe Biden will not appear on the ballot in November unless the Democratic Party acts and provides a legally acceptable remedy. And you might be going, well, what is that? What do you mean? This is from Ohio Secretary of State. This just came out on May 21st. Democratic Party candidate certification under the Ohio Code 3505.10. I write to inform you that my office still has not received communication on behalf of the Ohio Democratic Party or the Democratic National Committee that clarifies the party's intent to comply with Ohio's ballot access deadline. As previously explained, the Ohio revised codes require a political party selecting its presidential and vice presidential candidates by nominating convention to certify the names of those candidates to the Secretary of State on or before the 19th day before the day of the general election. The conflict between the August 7th, 2024 certification deadline and the date of your party's nomination convention is well established. In my correspondence to you dated April 5th, 2024, I offered two possible remedies: a change in the date by which your party formally nominates a presidential candidate, or action by the Ohio General Assembly to create an exception to the statutory requirement. Today, the Speaker of Ohio told members of the media they would not be a legislative action, and there is just not the will to do so from the legislature. With the legislative remedy taken off the table, I must remind you that the deadline is fast approaching, and the matter remains unresolved. Unless your party plans to comply with the statutory deadline, I am duty-bound to instruct boards of elections to begin preparing ballots that do not include the Democratic Party's nominees for president and vice president of the United States. And his last line here is, let me be clear that this is not an action I wish to take, as I believe it is not in the best interest of Ohio voters to have a choice between at least the two major party candidates for the nation's highest political office. Unfortunately, however, the Ohio House of Representatives has refused to act, and the Democratic Party has so far offered no legal acceptable remedy. As the Ohio Attorney State's General's Office has advised my office, the Democratic Party's offer to submit a provisional certification by the statutory deadline simply is not provided for by law. And there is no provision in Ohio's election code that would permit the Secretary to provide the Democratic Party with an alternative process to the one required in statute. Further, the General Assembly has clearly stated that no public official shall cause an election to be conducted other than in the time, place, and manner prescribed by the revised code. The integrity of your elections begins with the citizenry having full faith and confidence that their chief election officer will always follow the law. As such, my office seems that a remedy that both upholds the law and serves in the best interest of the voters of our state. I trust that you will act quickly to resolve this conflict so we can move forward with clarity in preparing for the November general election. Thank you for your prompt attention to this matter. Now, for people that don't understand, the DNC is being held in August. Super late. Why? Now it's fucking with states, especially Ohio, where it's not enough time to be on the November ballot. They need to have a certification by... That's why the Republican one's in June. Or I think it's July. June or July. It's coming up.
So then this could be a way...
This is a way to bring in a Mein Kampf, pro-Palestine speaking Democratic candidate.
I wasn't thinking about that, but maybe. I was thinking...
Because what was the 1856 election? President Pierce did the neutrality thing. Bleeding Kansas was horrible. You know what? I'm not going to get involved. It's a state issue. Sounds like a Republican. It's a state issue. It's a territory issue because it was the territory of Kansas, right? That was becoming a state. My hands are clean off this, even though it was Democrats, the border ruffians that were killing people and double voting, right? To make it a slave state. I'm not going to do anything. So it looks like he's taking the side of the slave side, right? So the incumbent president, which right now we have an incumbent president coming into an election to a DNC that now is too late to even get on the ballot. You don't think that they set that up because they're going to put somebody else, just like they did with President Pierce, to put it to Buchanan? And it was Buchanan, the last president that was before the Union went into a civil war. And it was under Buchanan that caused a civil war. because he supported and kept letting the South be the South. Today.
Has there been a response to it yet?
I haven't looked
and
at it.
And I also wonder, is
this the first sign they are dumping Biden, or they're dumping Biden as their nominee? Why would they schedule their convention so late? They've known this for months, right? They're going to put news come in. Seems Ohio don't want a man who showered with his daughter to appear at the ballot box. This is how they run Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom. See, people are starting to get it. And this is the prediction we made. I said, you watch. This is what's
But, they're also making it about just these two. And RFK Jr.'s been having his whole thing about getting on the ballot in all the states. Right. So is he on the ballot in Ohio? I wonder, did he make it?
I mean, he's made like 4 to 5 states. It's for him, it's a different process. It's individually and having enough of the poll and people at each state. He has to go by state by state by state.
But just imagine what it will do if they don't get the Democratic candidate in Ohio, but he's on there. I wonder how Ohio will go. Well, that's what's interesting. But I don't think they're going with RFK. The Democrats, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, they told him no, right? That's why he's running independent. He can't go change his mind now, right? He's already registered as the independent that he is. So. But again, I can see this spinning into something that's about, this is why we need to federally regulate elections. That's how it will be spun, because they were bringing that up before, right?
No, the Supreme Court's got this one. Like, this is where the whole election 2020 process comes into, like, the legislature is the one in control of the election. That's in the Constitution.
Right.
Right? And this is him stating that the secretary, like, he is not able to just... The Secretary of State of the state can't change the election process. That's what happened in the 2020 election with the mail-in votes and all that. Mm-hmm. That's illegal. That's why Trump contested the election. But people still are in Dumbo land. Like, ugh. The legislatures didn't approve that. The ones in Pennsylvania, the ones in Michigan, the ones in Arizona, they didn't approve it. The Secretary of State, who's now the fucking governor of Arizona... Right? Hobbs just said, I'm making it to where this voting can be days after we can get it in. The legislatures are in control of the elections of the state. So they're not going to get rid of that. Mm-hmm. But this is now the karma that's biting the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and he's obviously saying, I'm not going to have any of this happening in my state.
He's trying to say, let's get it figured out. And we gave you these 2 options and the legislature doesn't want to change it. This is like one of those so you tried to say the legislatures aren't in charge? That's what the Constitution says. That's the way it works. So anybody who believes that the 2020 election didn't have fraud, when especially every state that had all the crazy votes were when the Secretary of State took over the election, which isn't by law. But this is also the 1856 Jupiter-Neptune, and now Jupiter and Neptune are in square. Mm. And what happened? Jupiter-Neptune 1856. Oh, wait. Jupiter coming into Gemini. Yeah, it was 1858 and a 9, and that's when, oh, shit. Civil War talks start coming out. Abraham Lincoln loses his Senate seat, but then he has to face the man he lost to a senator as the general election candidate for the Northern Democrats and beats him. So that's history in the stars, you know what I mean? Like, but I don't know people.
That's a lot, from the Pope to the Civil War to, I don't know, everything.
I mean, well, that's what's really weird is like, a lot of people have been putting out the stuff about like Albert Pike and what he wrote about World War III and how it would be this. He was a Mason. He was part of the South. He's the only Confederate that I think was not in the war, but who has a statue, right? He was a Mason though. And I don't know if you remember when they opened up Robert E. Lee's,
Cornerstone or whatever.
Cornerstone, and then they found all that stuff. It was all Mason. Like 85% of all the stuff in there was about the Freemasons, right? And Albert Pike wrote in the late 1800s about how World War I, II, and III will start and what they'll be about. And right now, World War III is exactly playing out exactly the way it is of what he wrote.
Sounds like,
and that's from the South. He was a Southern Democrat, right? Mm-hmm. So the Democrats are part of this. Then Joe Biden's a Catholic. Second Catholic president of all time. So who's not to say that he's playing his hand the way that they want it to be played?
Yeah. I don't know.
That was great. I'm glad that was a good kickoff to the
the
re-intro to this show every week. So make sure that you join us on High Vibe, and I have the link for Anne's YouTube underneath here. And history can be quite a fun guide of helping, I don't think that history gets enough credit for also it's not about predicting the future, but as much as we like to learn from history, whether it was the pandemic, right? Looking at past pandemics. History has a place for us in the future all the time. Just as much as the future, we learn things from our past or vice versa. We look to the future to get us to the point we're in the moment when we're in the past. It goes back and forth each way.
Yeah, it's not just a straight line where we're going one way to an end. Right.
Right.
That's the thing. We're not heading towards an end. We're living. I don't know.
And the fact that Jupiter comes into Gemini on Saturday, nothing's as insignificant or small as maybe people think. Like right now, many people probably I didn't even know this was happening with the ICC or whatever.
And it's not we just picked really small things that were out there, weird news. This is main stuff. And if we're not hearing about it, but I've been in the midst of the end of the semester, so I haven't been paying attention to things. It could be all over the news. I don't know.
Right. But that's what's interesting. So I think the history helps put the dots together. And then there's a lot of empty space still.
Mm-hmm. Right. Would you say it's destined or no?
I mean, I'm more of a fatalist than a free will person, so.
I know, yeah. I mean, that's the thing.
Right, because for example, I just showed the chart of the invasion of France by the Nazis of June of 1940. That whole month, Uranus was at 23 degrees of Taurus. Where's it at today? 23 degrees of Taurus. And France now is declaring for the invasion or to take out the Israeli prime minister. It's all flipped. But it's...
Yeah.
Very weird that Ukraine has gotten the reins of all the Western nations. That's where the Nazis show themselves.
Interesting.
Including Pope Francis, who loves the Ukrainian children so much. So
I just think it's interesting that we're again seeing all the Western nations, all these European nations going to save us again. And it didn't work the first two times or before that. So I don't know what's going on, but...
No, Blinken's kind of the Chamberlain. Biden's kind of like a Chamberlain too. You can put it that way. That's why it looks like Trump or somebody like that will come in to be the hardcore.
Interesting.
And to raise the energy of a country back for war. That's why I'm a fatalist, but yeah.
But see, I feel like it happens. Things repeat, but to me, it isn't in the same way, and it's not always expected, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean,
It's not always what we expect, or it never is. Maybe it's always what the Catholic Church expects. I don't know. But
I mean, as the astrologer in me, I go, okay, I could see that it looks like a different hallway, and it looks like different rooms, and it looks like different doors and all that. But I know it's on the same foundation or in the same spot. Mm-hmm. So that's why I said in my Battle of the Gods 2 that you will see exactly people going against the Jews again. I brought my Mein Kampf English edition, first edition, on the stage and said, you watch, this is going to be what people are going to start saying. It was before the Hamas stuff was being pro-Palestine rhetoric. Before. Right. I went up on that stage and told it like it is and prepared people. And, well, or I'll put it this way, maybe throughout most of the history of, like, if we use the last 2,000 years, it's hard to see it repeat. But one guarantee of using ages, right? The precession of the equinox is every 2,000 years there becomes where it becomes extreme that you can't escape the fate of the age changing. Right? Like the end of the age of Aries was the end of the Jews and their ram horns. Right? And it went to the fish. They're Christians who have a fish on the back of their car. Right. And now we're coming into Aquarius, which is the water bearer, who's the person who has no clothes on, who's poor, trying to get some water and help and pour some water to somebody else. But really, Uranus sits on top of the clouds too. I mean, there's another part of it. But using the water bearer, you will own nothing and like it.
Well, I don't know what to say about that.
It's also a people without religion that's done. But when you see something like Dune, it becomes a world to where it's still Saturn, because Aquarius is Saturn, but it's also Uranus, to where it's innovation of like mining places and doing stuff, but the work is still there, but people feel like slaves.
I don't want to live like those.
I know,
spice
and
people
then
or
that's
whatever they
right,
are.
and then they all live in like these underground places of prophecy that take a long time. They wait thousands of years, right?
That's needing, or that's the legacy aspect.
You just drink the worm, the water of life. Drink the water.
No.
So,
well, I'm going to go ahead and just have my concoction with skull and moss.
I mean, my question about the ICC has been like, what happened about the whole pandemic and all the people that have been injured? That the UK have admitted that. Even America's CDC director under Trump just came on TV and admitted. Burke has admitted who was part of that. Like, now it's all over the world. That's been the biggest genocide there's been. But there's no crimes going after that. This is that way of getting rid of that.
Or even, the thing that I think was interesting was how the Pope talked about the Mediterranean, the people in the Mediterranean that are fleeing from the different
migrants,
things that are happening in African countries. And if you think about Sudan and the genocide happening there, in that region, and it's always there, there's so many things happening in our world at once. And we have to remember, I'm thinking of the picture that you had, I don't remember which show, but with the chute where all the people were being corralled into the chute, right? That we have to be mindful of. Our attention is being directed, and it's becoming more difficult for large agencies to easily direct our attention.
Yeah.
So it's like they have to ramp up and.
Or if you think of Africa, since 2020, it's the most of any continent in the world of countries freeing itself from their rulers.
Yeah,
it's like, I think, up to 9 now. Mm-hmm. So if anything, Africa is the freest place in the world. Like, they're closer to anarchy, but to be honest with you, the West shouldn't say a thing about Africa and what they've done there.
No.
The African people have been treated the worst. So they're going through their crazy figuring it out. That's how I look at it. Which sucks, but at least those are we shouldn't get involved. They're going to figure out how to do that.
Well, we shouldn't get re-involved. I mean, because so much is the legacy of what happened.
No,
before.
it's all, I mean, right now it's China that's all involved there, right? So
yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So.
But we could go on and on, so.
Yep. I always say it's funny. We always talk about the East and the West, never the middle, because the middle is Africa.
I just assume I'm in the middle. We're in the United States.
I know, but if you look at it, I think that's what makes the most magical place on the world, Africa, is because it's never followed the West or the East. It never does. The African people like to say that the gold was never the gold that people come to find here. It's the knowledge and the wisdom that's from the African world. That there's no question. If you have one apple and I have two, and you ate your apple, and you have here's my other apple. They don't even ask. You just share. You give. There's appreciation. There's support for all the mothers that are having children. I'm not talking about like the crazy stuff you see in Western news about it, but the African culture and the people and the tribes and they didn't get a COVID shot.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and
they're huge continent and so many different cultures, and it's been at the crossroads of different cultures.
It's the only continent where the birth rate has not declined to where it's not sustainable. They still are keeping the 3 to 4 children. Mm. So at the end of the day, in the apocalypse, if you're a Christian or whatever you follow, it will be just. Well,
they won't be here though.
I know, but it will be that Africa survives just because they didn't follow any of these ways. There's no abortion pill, like all of the stuff, like all of it. They just lived as humans shall. And that's why I think the origins of humanity are in Africa.
Well, we can talk about that.
And everybody else are bugs. So.
I kind of feel like a bug a lot of the time. So, yeah.
I mean,
just trying to survive.
All right, everyone. That was a good one. We'll see you on the next one. Much love. Bye-bye.
Bye.